Please subscribe to my channel. This is my sincere request to you. I thought this dinner was to celebrate my clinic finally turning a profit after 4 years. Then my father stood up, acting like he had laid every brick himself, and slid a contract across the table. It was a demand for equity from my brother, who had never stepped foot inside. My mother whispered that I owed them. I just smiled because they had no idea I had liberally bulletproofed the business against them on day one. My name is Piper Holmes. If you looked at the scene in my parents' living room that night, you would have seen a woman who had supposedly made it. I was 34 years old, standing in the center of a crowded room in Stonewall, wearing a dress that cost more than my first car, holding a glass of cheek-sparkling wine that was quickly going flat in the humidity. Around me, the air was thick with the smell of pot roast and the heavy cloying perfume my aunts favored. The noise was a dull roar of laughter and clinking silverware. This was ostensibly a celebration. After 4 years of grinding my bones to dust, after 4 years of eating instant noodles and sleeping on a cot in my back office, the Juniper Bridge Clinic had posted its first substantial annual profit. "We are just so proud," Aunt Linda said, leaning in close enough that I could smell the coffee on her breath. She patted my arm with a heavy hand. "We always told your mother you had the smarts for this. A doctor in the family, or well, a clinic owner. Close enough, right?" I smiled. It was the practiced tight smile I used for insurance adjusters who were trying to deny a claim. "Thank you, Aunt Linda. It has been a long road. And to think," she went on, gesturing with her half-eaten dinner roll toward my father across the room, "you had such a strong foundation. Family support is everything, isn't it? You can't put a price on that." I almost choked on my drink. Family support. The phrase rattled around in my skull like a loose coin in a dryer. During the last 4 years, the only thing my family had supported was their own skepticism when I signed the lease on the dilapidated building that would become Juniper Bridge. My father had told me I was throwing my life away when I could not afford to come home for Christmas 2 years in a row because I was covering shifts for nurses. I could not afford to pay overtime. My mother had told me I was cold and selfish. But tonight, history was being rewritten in real time. Tonight, because the clinic was finally making money, my success was suddenly a collective achievement. My father, Robert Caldwell, tapped a spoon against his wine glass. The sharp ding-ding-ding cut through the chatter. The room went silent. He stood by the fireplace, his chest puffed out, looking every inch the patriarch he believed himself to be. "Everyone, if I could have your attention," he boomed. His face was flushed, likely from the third whiskey I had watched him down. "I want to propose a toast to my daughter, Piper." He raised his glass toward me. I felt the weight of every gaze in the room land on my shoulders. "To Piper," he continued, his voice dripping with a sentimental syrup that made my skin crawl. "For finally seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. It takes a lot of grit to run a business. She gets that from me, of course." A ripple of polite laughter moved through the room. I tightened my grip on my glass until my knuckles turned white. "But more than that," my father said, his eyes scanning the crowd. "This is a victory for the Caldwell family values. We stick together. We push each other. We make sacrifices. When Piper came to us with this dream, we knew it would be hard, but we stood behind her because that is what families do." I stared at him, keeping my face perfectly neutral. I was remembering a phone call 3 years ago when I asked to borrow $500 to fix a broken sterilizer so I could stay open. He had told me that lending me money would be enabling my bad decision-making. I had sold my jewelry the next day to pay for the repair. To the Caldwell success. He shouted to success. The room echoed. I took a sip of the wine. It tasted like vinegar, and my father said, holding up a hand to stop the conversation from resuming, "Since we are celebrating milestones, I have another announcement, one that I think fits perfectly with the theme of growth and new beginnings." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of keys. They jingled loudly in the silence. My younger brother, Derek, stepped forward from the corner where he had been leaning against the wall, looking bored. Derek was 29, handsome in a lazy, unkempt sort of way, and had never held a job for longer than 8 months. He wore a flannel shirt that was unbuttoned too many buttons at the top, and he had a smirk playing on his lips that I knew all too well. "Derek," my father said, his voice softening into genuine affection, a tone I rarely heard directed at me. "Son, I know things have been tough lately with the layoff, but your mother and I believe in you. You need a leg up to get your contracting business off the ground. You need the right tools." He tossed the keys to Derek. My brother caught them with one hand, his grin widening. "Brand new Ford F-150, my father announced proudly, parked out in the driveway, fully paid for. Go take a look." The room erupted in applause. Derek pumped his fist in the air, looking like he had just won the Super Bowl rather than being handed a $60,000 vehicle for doing absolutely nothing. "Thanks, Pop," Derek shouted. "You're the man. We take care of our own." My father bellowed back. I stood there frozen, a $60,000 truck. My clinic had barely survived its infancy. I was still driving the sedan with a dented bumper and 150,000 m on the odometer. I had never asked them for a truck. I had never asked them for a handout. But the disparity was so sharp, so visceral, it felt like a physical slap. They celebrated my hard-earned survival with a toast. But they celebrated Derek's existence with a check. As the guests surged toward the front door to ooh and or over Derek's new toy, my father walked over to me. The warmth was gone from his face, replaced by a businesslike rigidity. "Piper," he said, nodding toward the kitchen. A word. He did not wait for a response. He turned and walked away. My mother, who had been hovering near the dessert table, caught my eye. She gave me a small, tight nod and followed him. My stomach twisted. This was the ambush. I set my glass down on a side table and followed them into the kitchen. The fluorescent lights here were harsh, buzzing with a low frequency that always gave me a headache. My father was leaning against the granite island, a renovation they had paid for the same year I was eating ramen, and my mother was standing by the sink, wringing her hands in a tea towel. On the counter, sitting next to a tray of dead eggs, was a blue folder. "Close the door, Piper," my father said. I pushed the swinging door shut, muffling the sounds of the party outside. "What is this about? I should probably go say congratulations to Derek." "Derek is fine," my father said dismissively. "He has a bright future, but we need to talk about yours and the family's." He tapped the blue folder with his index finger. "I have been looking over the numbers you sent," he said. I frowned. "I never sent you my numbers." "You sent them to your cousin Greg for tax advice," he said, not even blinking at the admission of snooping. "And Greg talks to me. 700,000 in gross revenue this year, 18% profit margin. You are doing better than we thought." "I am doing well," I corrected him. "I am doing well because I work 80 hours a week." My mother interjected softly. "We are doing well, Piper." "I don't follow," I said, though a cold dread was starting to pull in my gut. I knew exactly where this was going. I had feared this moment since the first day the clinic ledger turned black. My father opened the folder. Inside was a legal document, stapled in crisp. He slid it across the cold granite toward me. "This is a family agreement," he said. "We had our lawyer draw it up last week. It is a restructuring of the Juniper Bridge ownership." I looked down at the paper. The legal ease was dense, but the numbers jumped out at me immediately. 35%. "You want me to give away a third of my clinic?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "I'd give away," my father said, looking offended. "Allocate to Derek." I stared at him. Derek thinks a stethoscope is something you use to check tire pressure. He has never stepped foot inside my clinic for more than 10 minutes, and that was to use the bathroom. "He is your brother," my mother said, stepping forward. Her voice was trembling with that weaponized fragility she used so well. "He needs a position, Piper. He needs a title. Director of Operations sounds good. It will give him stability and the 35% equity. Well, that is just to keep the assets in the family." "Assets in the family," I repeated. "You mean my assets?" "We are a team," my father said, his voice hardening. "I just bought that boy a truck so he can look the part of a businessman. But a truck is not a career. You have a career. You have a surplus. It is time to share." "I have a surplus because I didn't take a salary for 2 years," I said, feeling the heat rise in my neck. I have a surplus because I learned how to code my own billing systems so I didn't have to hire a firm. Where was Derek then? Where were you? Do not take that tone with me. My father snapped. He slammed his hand on the counter, rattling the deviled eggs. We raised you. We put a roof over your head for 18 years. We fed you. We clothed you. That is the legal requirement of being a parent. I said, that is not an investment strategy. My mother let out a sharp gasp. Piper, how can you be so ungrateful after everything we have done? She moved closer, her eyes wet with tears that I knew she could summon on command. Annie, listen to me. Raising you wasn't free. The braces, the summer camps, the college tuition assistance. We poured everything into you. We made you who you are. Now that you have made it, you owe a debt to this house. You owe a debt to your brother who wasn't as lucky as you. Lucky? I've laughed. A short, dry sound. You think this was luck? It doesn't matter what it was, my father said, pointing a finger at my face. What matters is what happens now. You signed that paper. You bring Derek on board. He gets a salary. He gets the equity, and we stop worrying about his future. It is the least you can do. I looked at the document again. 35% ownership, a salary for a job he wasn't qualified to do. It was extortion. It was a shakedown wrapped in a Hallmark card. And if I don't, I asked. Then you are no daughter of mine, my father said, his voice dropping to a low growl. And you will find out just how lonely it is to run a business in this town without the Caldwell name backing you up. The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I looked at my mother. She was nodding in agreement with him, her face set in a look of grim determination. They truly believed this. They truly believed they owned me. They looked at my clinic, my patients, my blood and sweat, and they saw a piggy bank they had forgotten to smash open until now. I took a deep breath. I could scream. I could tear the paper in half and throw it in their faces. I could list every single time they had failed me, every time they had chosen Derek over me, every time they had laughed at my ambition. But that is what the old Piper would have done. The Piper who sought their approval, the Piper who ran a multi-million-dollar medical facility knew better. You do not win a war by firing all your ammunition in the first skirmish. You win by letting the enemy think they have walked into an empty room when really they have walked into a vault that locks from the outside. I reached out and picked up the folder. I closed it gently. I need to read it over, I said softly. My father's posture relaxed instantly. He smiled, a smug, victorious curling of his lips. He thought he had won. He thought I was folding, just like I always did when I was a teenager. Good girl, he said. I knew you would see reason. Take the weekend. Bring it back signed on Monday. We will have a little signing party. Cake and coffee. I'll see, I said. I turned to leave, clutching the folder to my chest like a shield. And Piper, my mother called out as I reached the door. I paused, hand on the frame. Don't forget to thank your father, she said. He is trying to help you build a legacy. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I pushed through the door, walked straight through the living room, past the relatives who were still fawning over Derek and his shiny new truck, and walked out the front door into the cool night air. I got into my battered sedan and threw the folder onto the passenger's seat. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so cold it felt like ice in my veins. They wanted 35%. They wanted to control Juniper Bridge. They had no idea. I started the engine and pulled away from the curb, leaving the celebration behind. I drove in silence for 10 minutes, the darkness of the country road soothing my eyes. Let them think I am thinking about it. I told myself, let them think I'm scared because what they didn't know, what they hadn't bothered to ask in their arrogance was that I had anticipated this. I knew my family. I knew that the moment I had something of value, they would come for it. Years ago, on the very first day, I filed my incorporation paperwork. I had sat down with a specialized attorney. We had drafted an operating agreement with a specific clause, a clause designed to protect the clinic from anyone who wasn't a licensed medical practitioner, a clause that made transferring equity to a non-qualified party not just difficult, but legally impossible without triggering a dissolution of the shares. I was safe. They couldn't touch me. I smiled in the darkness, a genuine smile this time. I was going to enjoy watching them try to bite into granite. My phone buzzed on the center console, lighting up the dark cabin of the car. I glanced down, expecting a text from my mother, perhaps a reminder to drive safely or another guilt trip. But it wasn't a text. It was an email notification from First Stone Community Bank. Subject: loan application received. Reference 88,392. I frowned. I hadn't applied for a loan. We were profitable. We were cash flow positive. I reached for the phone, my heart skipping a beat, and unlocked the screen to read the preview. Dear business owner, we have received your application for a $200,000 business expansion loan secured against the assets of Juniper Bridge Clinic LLC. My blood ran cold. I slammed on the brakes, screeching to a halt on the shoulder of the empty road. I opened the full email. The application had been submitted 20 minutes ago. Applicant name Derek Caldwell, Title Director of Operations. I stared at the glowing screen until the words blurred. They hadn't waited for me to sign. They hadn't waited for Monday. They were so confident, so entitled to my work, that they had already begun to loot the ship before they even had the keys. The smile vanished from my face. I wasn't just going to stop them. I was going to bury them. To understand why I sat in my car on the side of the road, staring at a fraudulent loan application with a calmness that bordered on psychosis, you have to understand the architecture of the Caldwell family. I do not mean the physical structure of the house in Stonevale with its manicured hydrangeas and the fresh coat of eggshell paint my father applied every 2 years. I mean the invisible load-bearing walls that held our lives together. From the outside, we were the model American family. My father was a hard-working mid-level manager at a logistics firm, a man who mowed his lawn on Saturday mornings and shook hands firmly at church on Sundays. My mother was the glue, the woman who organized bake sales and kept a spotless kitchen. And then there were the children, a son and a daughter, a match set. But inside that house there was a rule that was never spoken aloud, but was obeyed with religious fervor. The rule was simple. Piper handles it. Derek needs help. This dynamic did not start when we were adults. It was woven into the DNA of our childhood. I remember being 16 years old, sitting at the kitchen table with my calculus textbook open, trying to solve derivatives while my parents sat in the living room speaking in hushed, frantic tones. Derek, who was 14 then, had been caught shoplifting video games from the local mall. It was not a small incident. The police had been involved. I remember waiting for the explosion. I waited for my father to yell, for my mother to cry, for consequences to rain down. Instead, the door opened and they walked in with Derek sandwiched between them. They looked exhausted, but Derek just looked annoyed, as if the local authorities had wasted his afternoon. My father looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Piper, can you help your mother with dinner? We have had a long day." That was it. No punishment, no grounding. They had paid a lawyer to make it go away, paid the store to drop charges, and depleted the family vacation fund to cover the fines. When I asked about our summer trip to the lake, my mother had sighed, looking at me with disappointed eyes. "We have to make sacrifices for family. Piper, you understand. You are the strong one." That phrase became my prison. "You are the strong one." It sounded like a compliment, but it was actually a dismissal. It meant I did not need attention. It meant my problems were manageable while Derek's were catastrophic. It meant that my successes were expected, while his bare minimum efforts were treated like miracles. When I decided to go into healthcare, I did not do it because I had a bleeding heart. I did it because I looked at my family and realized that if I did not build my own fortress, I would be buried under the rubble of theirs. I needed a career that was recession-proof. I needed a skill set that no one could take away from me. I started at Harbor Light Medical Center right out of school. It was a massive churning machine of a hospital, the kind of place that chewed up young nurses and physician assistants and spit them out gray and trembling. I took every shift they offered. I worked nights, I worked weekends, I worked holidays because the holiday pay was double time and a half for 5 years. My life was a blur of scrubs, antiseptic soap, and the relentless beep of heart monitors. I saw things that would haunt a soldier. I held the hands of strangers as they took their last breaths because their families could not make it in time. I cleaned up blood and vomit. I stood on my feet for 14 hours at a stretch ignoring the burning in my arches until my legs went numb. During those years, my phone would ring. It was usually my mother. "Are you coming for Easter?" She would ask. "I'm working, Mom," I would say, leaning against the nurse's station, trying to keep my eyes open. "I picked up an extra shift." "Oh," she would sigh. "Well, Derek is bringing his new girlfriend. We were hoping to have everyone together. It is a shame you work so much. You are missing out on life." I was not missing out on life. I was fighting for one. But they never asked about the work. They never asked about the patient I saved from a septic shock or the certification I just earned. They only asked when I would be available to fill a seat at their table to complete the picture of the happy family for the neighbors. Meanwhile, Derek was drifting. He went to college for a year and dropped out because the professors were too demanding. My father paid off the tuition loan. Derek decided he wanted to be a graphic designer, so my parents bought him a top-of-the-line computer. He sold it 6 months later to pay for a trip to Vegas. Derek decided he was going to flip houses. My father co-signed a small loan. The house sat unfinished for a year until the bank took it back. Every time Derek fell, a safety net appeared. It was woven from my parents' retirement savings and their denial. And every time I came home exhausted and thin, driving my 10-year-old car with the peeling paint, I was greeted with backhanded comments. "That car is an eyesore, Piper," my father would say, looking at my sedan in the driveway. "You are a medical professional. You should drive something that reflects your status." "I am saving money, Dad," I would reply. "Saving for what? You can't take it with you." "I am saving to open my own clinic." The reaction was always the same. A scoff, a shake of the head. "Piper, don't be ridiculous." My father told me once, sitting on the porch with a beer in his hand, "Opening a practice is a rich man's game. It takes capital. It takes connections. We are Caldwells. We are employees, not employers. You have a good job at the hospital. Don't get greedy. You do not have the backing for that." He meant he would not back me. He meant that the money he poured into Derek's failed ventures was an investment in hope, but money given to me would be a waste because I was already fine. I was the cactus in the corner that survived without water. Why waste the watering can on me? My mother was softer, but her words cut deeper. "Derek is just a late bloomer," she would whisper to me in the kitchen while I helped her dry dishes. "He is sensitive. The world is hard on boys like him. You have always been like a rock. You can handle the pressure. We don't worry about you." They didn't worry about me. They also didn't know me. They didn't know that I ate peanut butter sandwiches for dinner 5 nights a week to save $20 on groceries. They didn't know that I cut my own hair in the bathroom mirror because a salon visit cost $60. They didn't know that I had not been on a vacation in 6 years. They didn't know that I had walked away from a relationship with a man I truly loved because he wanted to travel and enjoy life, and I was obsessively hoarding every penny for a dream that my family called a joke. I was a ghost in my own life, haunting the corridors of the hospital and the empty rooms of my cheap apartment, stacking dollar bills like bricks to build a wall between me and them. I began to realize the truth during a Christmas dinner 2 years before I opened the clinic. Derek had arrived late, drunk and crying about a girl who had dumped him. The entire evening pivoted around him. My father was consoling him, pouring him whiskey. My mother was making him a plate of food, cooing soft words. I sat at the end of the table, ignored. I had just been promoted to a lead role at the hospital. I had received a significant raise. I wanted to tell them, but as I watched them fawn over Derek's self-inflicted misery, I understood. I was not a person to them. I was a utility. I was the backup generator. I was the insurance policy. If Derek failed, they had me to point to and say, "Look, we raised a success." If they got sick or old, they assumed I would be the one to pay the bills and manage the care because I was the competent one. I was the load-bearing wall, and you do not thank a wall for standing up. You only curse it if it cracks. That realization dried up the last drops of guilt I had about not visiting enough. It hardened something inside me. I stopped seeking their validation. I started seeking leverage. The day I signed the lease for the Juniper Bridge space was a Tuesday in November. It was raining a cold gray drizzle that soaked through your coat. I had asked my father a week before if he wanted to come with me just to look at the space just to see where his daughter was going to plant her flag. "I have a golf outing with the guys from the plant," he had said. "Besides, Piper, are you sure you want to sign a commercial lease? The economy is shaky. If you go bankrupt, don't expect us to bail you out. We have to think about our retirement." I didn't ask my mother. I knew she would just echo him, so I went alone. The building was an old brick structure on the edge of the commercial district in Stoneville. The office I was renting was on the second floor. It smelled of stale coffee and dust. The carpet was a hideous shade of industrial brown, stained in the corners. The fluorescent lights flickered with a dying buzz. To anyone else, it looked like a mistake. To me, it looked like freedom. The landlord was a grumpy man named Mr. Henderson, who clearly wanted to be anywhere else. He slapped the lease on a folding table in the middle of the empty room. "Standard 3-year term," he grunted. "First and last month's rent up front. You break anything, you buy it. You got the check." I reached into my bag. My hand was trembling. This check represented everything I had. It was every skipped meal, every doubled shift, every lonely Friday night. If this failed, I would be destitute. I would have to crawl back to my parents and hear my father say, "I told you so." For the rest of my life, I looked at the phone sitting on the table next to the lease. I stared at the black screen, waiting. Just one text. "Good luck. We are proud of you. Go get them." The screen stayed black. I picked up the pen. The plastic felt cold against my fingers. The sound of the rain hitting the single window pane was the only applause I was going to get. I signed my name, Piper Holmes. I handed the check to Mr. Henderson. He glanced at the amount, nodded, and tossed a set of brass keys onto the table. "Welcome to the building," he said, walking out the door without looking back. I stood there for a long time in the silence. I was terrified. I was nauseous with anxiety. I was completely alone. But as I looked around that ugly empty room, I felt a strange lightness. I owned this risk. I owned this fear. And because I owned the risk, I owned the reward. My family thought I was strong because I endured. They were wrong. I was strong because I had learned to function without the oxygen of their love. I picked up the keys. They were heavy, solid metal. 4 years later, those keys would open a door to a place that generated nearly $1 million a year. And 4 years later, my family would look at those keys and see a lottery ticket they felt entitled to scratch. But standing there in the rain-dimmed light of that November afternoon, I made a promise to the empty room. I promised that no matter how hard it got, no matter how much money I made or lost, this would be mine. I walked over to the window and looked down at the street. People were rushing by, heads down against the rain. None of them knew what I had just done. None of them knew that Piper Holmes had just cut the last emotional cord tethering her to the people who were supposed to love her. I took a deep breath of the dusty air. It tasted better than any pot roast my mother had ever made. I didn't know then that the hardest part wasn't going to be building the clinic. The hardest part was going to be defending it from the people who had told me not to build it in the first place. But as I locked the door behind me and walked down the stairs, I was already preparing for war. Even if I didn't know the enemy would have my last name, the name Juniper Bridge Clinic sounded pastoral. It sounded established, safe and serene. It conjured images of babbling brooks and healing herbs. The reality was that I named it after the street I grew up on because I could not think of anything else. And the clinic itself was a 2,000 square T concrete box on the second floor of a fading strip mall that smelled faintly of the dry cleaner downstairs. I had decided early on to focus strictly on adult, primary care and women's health. I cut pediatrics out of the business plan entirely. Children required colorful waiting rooms, toy chests that needed constant sanitizing, and parents who would call at 3 in the morning because of a fever. I did not have the capital for the toys, and I did not have the patience for the parents. I needed high volume, low drama medicine, but knowing what I needed and actually building it were two very different things. The first 3 months were a lesson in humiliation. I was not just the doctor. I was the IT department, the janitor, the procurement officer, and the billing specialist. I bought my waiting room chairs from a closing travel agency. They were a hideous shade of teal, but they were $1.10 each. My exam table came from a chiropractor who was retiring to Florida. It had a squeak in the left stirrup that no amount of lubricant could fix, but it held weight, and that was all that mattered. My biggest expense was the diagnostic equipment, the EKG machine, the ultrasound, the blood analyzers. I couldn't buy them outright, so I signed leases with interest rates that made my stomach churn. Every month, a bill for $4,000 would arrive, regardless of whether I had seen one patient or 100. In that first month, I saw 12 patients total. The silence in the clinic was deafening. I would sit at my desk staring at the phone, willing it to ring. I checked the line 3 times a day to make sure it wasn't broken. It wasn't. People just didn't know I existed, and the ones who did were wary of a doctor whose office was next to a discount vape shop. The math was brutal. My overhead was $6,000 a month. My revenue was barely scratching $800. I couldn't tell my parents. If I told them I was bleeding money, my father would have shown up with a smug grin and a job application for a receptionist role at his logistics firm. I would rather have starved. So I did the only thing I could do. I went back to Harbor Light Medical Center. I worked my clinic from 8:00 in the morning until 5:00 in the afternoon. Then I would drive across town, change scrubs in the car, and work the 7 to 7 overnight shift in the emergency room 3 nights a week. I would treat gunshot wounds, overdoses, and car crash victims all night, fueled by terrible hospital and adrenaline. Then I would drive back to Juniper Bridge, splash cold water on my face, and unlock the doors for another day of staring at an empty schedule. I was sleeping an average of 20 hours a week. My hands developed a permanent tremor from caffeine. I lost 10 pounds because I forgot to eat, but I paid the rent. By the 3rd month, traffic started to pick up slightly. I hired a receptionist, a young girl named Kay, who spent more time on TikTok than she did managing files. I thought having a front desk person would give me legitimacy. It lasted 2 weeks. One Tuesday, the waiting room actually had 3 people in it. A rush. I was in the back with a patient performing a pelvic exam. When I heard the front door chime, then I heard shouting. I finished the exam, apologized to the patient, and rushed out to the front. Kay was gone. She had left a sticky note on the monitor that read, "Too stressful. Sorry." She had walked out because 2 phones rang at the same time. For the next 6 months, I was a one-woman circus. I would room a patient, take their vitals, and start the history. If the phone rang, I would have to excuse myself, run to the front desk, answer it with my best professional voice, schedule an appointment, and then run back to the exam room and switch back to doctor mode. At 6:00 in the evening, when the last patient left, I didn't go home. I put on yellow rubber gloves and scrubbed the toilet. I mopped the floors. I wiped down every door handle. There is a specific kind of loneliness that hits you when you are on your knees scrubbing a scuff mark off linoleum in a building you own, knowing that if you don't do it, nobody will. I almost lost it all in the 5th month. It wasn't a medical error. It was a clerical one. In the United States, you live and die by insurance credentialing. If you are not in the network, you do not get paid. I had spent weeks filling out the applications for the major insurance carriers. I received a letter on a Friday afternoon. It was a rejection from the largest insurer in the state. I had missed a checkbox on page 42 regarding malpractice liability limits. Because of that one missed box, my application was denied and I was locked out of reapplying for 90 days. 90 days without being able to bill the majority of patients in Stoneball. It was a death sentence. I sat on the floor of my office and dry heaved. I couldn't breathe. This was it. The lease, the machines, the sleepless nights, all gone because I missed a checkbox. I pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over my father's contact. I could hear his voice in my head already. I told you it was a rich man's game. Piper, I didn't call him. Instead, I called Mark. Mark was a friend from college who had gone into corporate law. We hadn't spoken in 2 years, but he answered on the 2nd ring. I explained the situation through tears. I couldn't control. He didn't offer pity. He asked for the file number. "Give me an hour," he said. He called back 40 minutes later. "It is fixed," he said. I called their provider relations department. I threatened to file a formal complaint about their confusing application UI. "They are processing your approval manually." You will be live on Monday." I sobbed. I thanked him profusely. "You owe me a dinner," he said. "And Piper, hire an office manager. You are a good doctor, but you are a terrible administrator." He was right, but I couldn't afford an office manager. I needed a miracle. The miracle arrived 2 weeks later in the form of Mrs. Gable. Mrs. Gable was 62 years old, a pillar of the local church community, and a woman who was known for being difficult. She had been to 3 other doctors in Stonevale complaining of fatigue and leg pain. They had all told her she was getting older and needed to lose weight. She came to me as a last resort because I could see her on a Saturday morning. I listened to her. I didn't interrupt. I didn't look at my watch. When she described the specific type of heaviness in her chest, when she walked upstairs, something clicked. It wasn't just fatigue. I ordered a D-dimer test and a STET CT scan of her chest. My competitors had missed a pulmonary embolism, a blood clot in her lung. It was small, but it was there. If it had moved, it would have killed her instantly. I sent her to the ER immediately with a handwritten note. She was treated and released 3 days later. Mrs. Gable did not just say thank you. She became my marketing department. She told the church choir. She told her bridge club. She told the lady at the grocery store checkout. "Dr. Holmes listens." She told them, "Dr. Holmes saved my life." Suddenly, the phone didn't stop ringing, and the people calling weren't asking if I accepted Medicaid. They were asking for Dr. Holmes specifically. The revenue spiked. I finally had enough cash flow to take Mark's advice. I put out an ad for a head nurse and office manager. I interviewed 12 people. 11 of them were polite, soft-spoken, and completely wrong. The 12th was Nina Hart. Nina was 45 with short, spiky gray hair and eyes that looked like they could cut glass. She walked into my office, looked at the chaotic stack of files on my desk and frowned. "You need a filing system," she said before she even introduced herself, "and you look like you haven't slept in a week." I hired her on the spot. Nar was not warm. She was not cuddly. She was a sledgehammer of efficiency. She renegotiated my supply contracts and saved me 15% on gauze and syringes. She fired a cleaning service I had hired because they missed a spot on the window. She organized the schedule so I actually had a lunch break. She became the backbone of Juniper Bridge. She protected my time like a pit bull. With Nar running the front and me running the back, the clinic stabilized. We weren't rich, but we were functional. It was around this time, late in the first year, that I bought a black leather-bound notebook. It wasn't for medical records. It was for me. I sat in my office late one night. The hum of the server, the only sound. I opened the first page and wrote down everything I had spent, every penny of debt, every hour of sleep lost. Then, on the second page, I wrote a set of bylaws for myself. Rule number 1, cash reserves must cover 6 months of operating expenses. Rule number 2, no partnerships without full legal vetting. And then in bold ink, I wrote rule number 3, the family stays on the sidelines. I stared at that sentence. It felt cruel to write it down, but I knew it was necessary. My family had not been there when I was scrubbing toilets. They had not been there when I was hyperventilating over the insurance rejection. They had not been there when I was holding Mrs. Gable's hand while we waited for the ambulance. They had forfeited their right to be part of this. This clinic was built on my trauma, my exhaustion, and my resilience. It was a closed ecosystem, and they were an invasive species. By the end of the second year, the red ink in my ledger turned black. It was a small profit, maybe $10,000 for the whole year, but it was profit. I quit my job at the hospital the first night after I turned in my badge at Harbor Light. I went home to my apartment. I didn't have to set an alarm for an overnight shift. I didn't have to wake up at 4 in the morning to finish charts. I took a hot shower. I put on clean pajamas. I lay down in my bed for the first time in 2 years. I slept for 8 straight hours. I woke up the next morning with the sun on my face, and for a fleeting moment, I forgot who I was. Then I remembered I was Piper Holmes. I was the owner of Juniper Bridge Clinic, and I had done it alone. I made myself a cup of coffee and stood by the window. Looking out at the world, I felt invincible. I didn't know that success was a beacon that would eventually summon the vultures. But in that moment, the silence was not lonely. It was victorious. Success has a funny way of rewriting history. In the medical world, we call it revisionist history. When a patient suddenly claims they have always exercised 5 times a week, the moment their blood work comes back clean. In the Caldwell family, it was called Tuesday. The catalyst for this sudden shift in the family narrative was a piece of paper that cost 75 cents at the newsstand. The Stoneville Herald, a local paper that usually dedicated its front page to high school football scores and pumpkin festivals, had run a feature on small businesses revitalizing the downtown corridor. And there, right below the fold on page 1, was my face. It was a candid shot taken by a photographer who had dropped by the clinic on a rainy Tuesday. I was wearing my white coat, a stethoscope draped around my neck, looking at a chart with a furrowed brow. The headline read, "The doctor is in how Juniper Bridge Clinic is bringing affordable care back to Stoneville." It was a fluff piece. It mentioned my dedication to the community and my innovative low-overhead model. It did not mention the nights I slept on the floor or the loans that kept me awake at 3:00 in the morning. But, to my parents, that newspaper was not just wood pulp and ink. It was a certificate of validation. Suddenly, the daughter who was playing doctor and throwing her money away on rent was the toast of the neighborhood. My mother bought 10 copies. She didn't buy them to read. She bought them to distribute. She handed them out to the ladies in her book club. She left a copy on the counter at the post office. She even mailed one to a distant cousin in Ohio whom we had not spoken to since the late 90s. I found out about this new public relations campaign when I ran into Mrs. Higgins at the grocery store. Mrs. Higgins lived 2 doors down from my parents. "Piper," she exclaimed, blocking my cart in the cereal aisle. "I saw the article. Your father is just beaming. He told me yesterday that he always knew you were a visionary. He said he was the one who encouraged you to look at that building on 4th Street. I gripped the handle of my cart so hard my knuckles turned white. My father had told me that building was a rat trap and that I would be out of business in 6 months. Did he?" I asked, forcing a smile that felt like it was made of wax. "Oh, yes," she continued, oblivious. "He said the Caldwells have a head for business. It must be nice to have that kind of mentorship." I walked away before I could say something that would get me disowned. It was fascinating in a morbid sort of way to watch them appropriate my struggle. They were like parasites attaching themselves to a host the moment it showed signs of vitality. They didn't care about the medicine. They didn't care that I had diagnosed 3 early-stage cancers that month. They cared that their last name was in bold print. Then came Derek. I had not heard from my brother in 3 months. The last time we spoke, he had asked to borrow $200 to fix the screen on his iPhone. I had said no 2 days after the article ran. My phone rang during my lunch break. "Hey, sis," Derek said. His voice had that breezy, unearned confidence that always set my teeth on edge. "Saw the write-up. Looking good. You look very professional." "I am a professional, Derek," I said, taking a bite of my salad. "What do you want?" "Whoa, relax," he laughed. "Just calling to congratulate you. It sounds like things are really popping off down there. The article said you are seeing 40 patients a day." "Something like that," I said guardedly. "That is a lot of traffic." He mused. "You know, I have been thinking with that kind of volume, you are going to need someone to handle the back-end operations, logistics, that sort of thing." I stopped chewing. "I have Nina. She handles the office." "Yeah, but Nar is a nurse, right?" Derek said. "She is labor. You need management. You need someone with a big-picture mindset, someone who can maximize your vertical integration." I almost laughed out loud. Vertical integration. He had definitely heard that on a podcast that morning. "Derek," I said slowly, "you were fired from the pizza place because you forgot to turn the oven on twice. I don't think you are ready for medical operations." "That was different," he said quickly, his tone hardening. "The manager there had it out for me. Look, I am just saying you are family. If you are hiring, you should look in-house first. Keep the money in the circle." "I am not hiring," I said. "And if I were, I would need someone with a degree in healthcare administration." Degrees are for people who can't hustle. He muttered. Fine, whatever. Just thought I would offer to help you out. Don't come crying to me when you burn out. He hung up. I stared at the phone, shaking my head. I thought that was the end of it. I thought it was just Derek being Derek, fishing for a salary he didn't want to earn. I was wrong. It wasn't a random call. It was a pro. A week later, the invitation came. Piper, honey, my mother said over the phone, we miss you. It has been months since we had a proper family dinner. I am making lasagna. Lasagna was my favorite. It was the meal she made for my high school graduation. It was the meal she made when I got into college. It was comfort layered with cheese and sauce. It was also a weapon. I am pretty tired. Mom, I said. Nonsense. She insisted. You have to eat. And your father wants to hear all about the clinic. He is so proud of the article. Just come over for an hour, please, for me. I agreed. I agreed because despite everything, despite the neglect, the gaslighting, the favoritism, there was a small stupid part of me that wanted to believe them. I wanted to believe that the article had actually changed their view of me. I wanted to sit at the table and have my father look at me with the same adoration he reserved for Derek. I drove to the house in Stonevale on a Sunday evening. The lawn was freshly mowed. Derek's old sedan was in the driveway, which meant he was there too. When I walked in, the house smelled of garlic and oregano. It smelled like safety. My father met me at the door, not with a criticism about my car or my clothes, but with a glass of red wine. There she is, he said, smiling. The mogul. He took my coat. He led me to the living room where Derek was sitting on the couch watching a football game. Even Derek nodded at me, a gesture that bordered on respectful. Dinner was surreal. My mother served the lasagna, and it was perfect. My father asked questions that seemed genuine. How is the staffing? Are the insurance companies paying on time? Is the location working out for 45 minutes? I let my guard down. I talked about the challenges of the flu season. I talked about the new EKG machine I was saving up for. I felt for the first time in my life like an equal at this table. Then the plates were cleared. My father poured himself a second glass of wine and leaned back in his chair. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The warmth evaporated, replaced by a cool, calculating tension. You know, Piper, he began, swirling the wine in his glass. It is impressive what you have done. Truly, but I worry. Worry about what? I asked, reaching for my water scale. He said you are growing fast, and in business growth is the most dangerous time. That is when the sharks come out. Competitors, lawsuits, regulators. I have a lawyer, I said. I have insurance. I am covered. External help is fine, he said, dismissing my point with a wave of his hand. But they are mercenaries. They work for a paycheck. When the going gets tough, they bail. You need a bedrock. You need people who have skin in the game. I put my glass down. Dad, where is this going? I was talking to Derek, he said, gesturing to my brother who was picking at his teeth with a fingernail. And we think it is time to formalize the family support. You shouldn't be out there on an island. It is too risky. I like my island, I said quietly. It is reckless, my father corrected, his voice dropping an octave. You are a single woman running a cash-heavy business. You are a target. What you need is a partnership structure, a family trust, perhaps something where the liability and the assets are shared. To protect you, to protect me, I repeated, by giving you ownership. Not me, he said, smiling benevolently. Us, the family. Derek is looking for a new direction. He has a lot of ideas about marketing. If we brought him in as a partner, gave him a stake, he could watch your back. He could be your eyes and ears while you are seeing patients. We discussed this. Derek chimed in, his mouth full of bread. I could rebrand the whole place. Make it pop on Instagram. You are leaving money on the table, Piper. I looked from my father to my brother. The lasagna felt like a stone in my stomach. The peaceful dinner was a boardroom meeting in disguise. They didn't want to celebrate me. They wanted to colonize me. I am not looking for partners, I said, my voice steady, and I am certainly not looking to give away equity. The clinic is mine, 100% mine. The air in the room didn't just cool, it froze. My mother stopped stacking plates. Derek stopped chewing. My father's face went from benevolent patriarch to the cold, hard mask I knew so well. That is a very selfish way to look at it, my father said. It is not selfish, I countered. It is business. You told me yourself. Dad, it is a rich man's game. I built it with my own money. Why would I share the ownership now that the risk is gone? Because you are a Caldwell, he snapped. He slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. You carry my name. That clinic carries the reputation of this family. Do you think you got those brains from the mailman? You got them from me. You got that drive from the way we raised you. You raised me to figure it out myself, I said, standing up. So I did. Sit down, my father commanded. No, I said. I think I'm done. The lasagna was delicious. Mom, thank you. Piper, don't walk away when I'm talking to you, my father shouted. His face was flushing a dark, angry red. You are letting a little bit of success go to your head. You think you are better than us now? Is that it? You think you are too good to help your brother? Helping is one thing, I said, grabbing my purse. Handing over a third of my life's work to someone who can't even hold down a job at a pizza place is not help. It is theft. Watch your mouth, Derek yelled, standing up as if to intimidate me. I looked at him. He wasn't scary. He was pathetic. A 30-year-old child waiting for his allowance. Good night, I said. I walked out. I didn't look back. I heard my mother crying as I closed the front door. The sound muffled but distinct. It was her go-to manipulation tactic. But tonight, it didn't slow my step. I got into my car and drove. I didn't go home to my apartment. I couldn't. I felt too restless, too agitated. I drove straight to the clinic. I needed to see it. I needed to touch the walls and make sure it was still mine. I let myself in the back door. The clinic was dark, smelling of antiseptic and silence. It was the only peace I had. I walked to the front desk and sat in Nar's chair. The computer monitor was in sleep mode. I jiggled the mouse to wake it up. I wanted to check the schedule for the next day. I needed to focus on work. I needed to remind myself that I was a doctor, not just a disappointing daughter. The screen flickered to life. The scheduling software was open. I scanned the list for tomorrow. Mrs. Gable at 9:00, Mr. Henderson at 9:30, a new patient at 10:00. Then I saw it. There was a slot blocked out for Tuesday at 4:00 in the afternoon. It wasn't a patient appointment. It was marked in the internal calendar as administrative vendor meeting. I clicked on the details. Visitor named Derek Caldwell, purpose facility walkthrough, office measurement notes, checking dimensions for new management suite. I stared at the screen, my breath hitched in my throat. He hadn't asked me. He hadn't confirmed anything. He had called Kay, or maybe he had used an online booking tool, bypassing me entirely. And the note, new management suite. He wasn't waiting for my answer. He was already measuring the drapes. They weren't just asking for a seat at the table anymore. They were coming to rearrange the furniture. I picked up my phone and took a picture of the screen. My hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't from rage. It was from the chilling realization that my father was right about one thing. The sharks were circling. He just forgot to mention that they had keys to my house. I deleted the appointment. Then I opened the user logs to see exactly how he had gotten into the system. And as I sat there in the dark, bathed in the blue light of the monitor, I knew the dinner had just been the opening ceremony. The war had officially begun. The document my father placed before me was not a suggestion. It was not a draft for discussion. It was titled in bold capitalized Arial font, Family Asset Integration and Management Agreement. We were sitting in my parents' living room again, but the warmth of the lasagna dinner from the previous week was gone. This was a summit. My father sat at the head of the table wearing a tie even though it was a Tuesday evening. My mother sat to his right, her hands folded over a notebook. Derek sat to his left, spinning a pen between his fingers, looking like a bored teenager in detention rather than a prospective executive. I picked up the document. It was heavy. Read page 3, my father said. His voice was devoid of emotion. It was the voice of a man closing a deal on a pallet of shipping crates. I turned the page. My eyes scanned the clauses, and my stomach dropped. Clause 4. Executive appointment. Derek Caldwell shall be appointed as Chief Operating Officer of Juniper Bridge Clinic immediately. This position is permanent and not subject to probationary periods. Clause 5. Compensation. The Chief Operating Officer shall receive an annual base salary of $95,000 plus full health benefits and a quarterly performance bonus equivalent to 5% of gross revenue. Clause 6. Equity distribution. In recognition of family goodwill and foundational support, 35% of all equity and voting rights in Juniper Bridge Clinic shall be transferred to Derek Caldwell. I looked up $95,000. It is market rate for a COO, my father said smoothly. I checked online. For a COO with an MBA and 10 years of experience, I countered, keeping my voice level. Derek has an associate's degree in general studies that he never finished. Experience is relative, Derek said, slouching in his chair. I have life experience. I know people. I can handle the vendors. You are too soft with them. I would go in there and crack some skulls. Get us better rates. We are a medical clinic, Derek. I said, we do not crack skulls. We treat patients. It is the same thing. He shrugged. It is customer service. I looked back at the paper. It was insane. $95,000 was more than I paid myself. If I agreed to this, the clinic would be in the red within 6 months. There is more, my mother said softly. I looked at her. Her face was a mask of tragic martyrdom. Page 5, she whispered. I flipped to page 5. Clause 8. Parental legacy stipend. The owner, Piper Holmes, agrees to remit a monthly maintenance fee of $2,500 to Robert and Martha Caldwell. This fee is in perpetuity in recognition of historical, financial, and emotional investment. I stared at the number, $2,500 a month. That was my rent payment for the clinic. You want me to pay you rent? I said, for being my parents. It is not rent, my mother said, her eyes welling up with those practiced tears. It is restitution. Do you know what we sacrificed for you? The vacations we didn't take. The car I didn't buy so you could have braces. We poured our lives into you, Piper. We gave you the platform to stand on now that you are standing so tall. Are you really going to look down on us and let us struggle on a fixed income? You are not struggling, I said. Dad just bought a $60,000 truck. That was an investment in Derek's future. My father snapped. Do not count my money. We are talking about your obligations. I have no legal obligation to pay you a salary for raising me. I said, that is not how parenting works, and I certainly have no obligation to hire Derek. Derek slammed his hand on the table. See, this is what I'm talking about. She is so selfish. He turned to our parents, his face twisting into a sneer. She has always been like this. She thinks she is better than us. She has the clinic. She has the money. She has the reputation. She has it all. And she can't even spare a slice for her own brother. It is greedy. That is what it is. I am not greedy, I said, my voice shaking slightly despite my best efforts. I am responsible. I have employees. I have patience. I cannot drain the operating capital just to fund your lifestyle. What lifestyle? Derek wed. I just want a job, Piper. I want to help you. I turned to him. Okay, tell me how you would help. Specifically, what is your plan for the first 90 days as COO? How would you improve patient flow? How would you handle HIPAA compliance audits? What is your strategy for negotiating with Blue Cross, Blue Shield? Derek blinked. He looked at my father, then back at me. I would bring in people. He stammered. I know a lot of guys. I could get the word out. Marketing, you know, buzz. Buzz, I repeated. You want $95,000 a year to create buzz. It is about connections, my father interjected, stepping in to save his drowning son. Derek has a magnetic personality. You are clinical. You are cold. You need a face for the business. I am the face of the business, I said. My face is on the sign. My father leaned forward. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with a threat that wasn't physical, but was no less violent. Listen to me carefully, Piper, he said, his voice low. We are offering you a chance to do this, the easy way, to keep this family whole. But if you refuse to sign this, if you choose your money over your blood, then do not be surprised when the family chooses to protect itself. Is that a threat? I asked. "It is a reality," he said. "If you are not with us, you are against us. And if you are against us, do not expect us to play happy family at Christmas. Do not expect us to support you when you inevitably crash and burn. You will be alone, truly alone." My mother let out a sob. "I just want everyone to get along. Why do you have to be so difficult, Piper? Just sign the paper. It is just money. We are talking about love." I looked at them. The tableau was perfect. The stern father, the weeping mother, the victimized brother. They had rehearsed this. They had built a narrative where I was the villain, the miser hoarding gold while the peasants starved. I stood up. I didn't yell. I didn't flip the table. "I am not signing this," I said, "and Derek is not stepping foot in my clinic as an employee." "Then you are making a mistake," my father said. He didn't stand up. He just watched me with cold reptilian eyes. "A very expensive mistake." I walked out. By the time I got back to my apartment, the digital assault had begun. My phone buzzed incessantly. It wasn't just my parents. It was the extended network. "Aunt Linda, your mother called me in tears. I can't believe you would treat them like that after all they did for you. Family is everything. Piper. Cousin Greg. Hey, heard you icing Derek out. Not cool. He's a good guy. Just needs a break. Don't be a corporate shark." Uncle Mike disappointed. A daughter should honor her father. They were triangulating me. My father had gotten on the phone the second I left and spun a story. I was the ungrateful daughter. I was the monster. I didn't reply to a single message. I didn't defend myself. I knew that any response would just be fuel for their fire. Instead, I sat down at my computer. I opened a new folder. I named it Evidence. I took screenshots of every text message. I scanned the family agreement document, which I had swiped from the table before leaving. My father had been too focused on his glare to notice. I wrote down a summary of the meeting, dating and timing it. I was not going to fight them with emotion. I was going to fight them with documentation. The next morning at the clinic, I showed the document to Nar Hart. Nar sat in my office, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. She read the clauses in silence. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator where we kept the vaccines. When she finished, she took off her glasses and looked at me. Her expression was grave. "This isn't a contract," she said. "This is a ransom note." "I know." I said. "They think I will fold because of the guilt. They don't just want money," Nar said, tapping the paper with a manicured fingernail. "They want control. Clause 4. Not subject to probationary periods. That means you couldn't fire him even if he burned the place down. They want to hijack the ship." I told them no. I said I walked out. "Good," Nar said. "But be careful, Dr. Owens. People like this, when you close the front door in their face, they don't go home. They check the back windows. They check the basement. They feel entitled to this, and entitlement is a dangerous drug." "What can they do?" I asked, though a knot of anxiety was tightening in my chest. "The clinic is in my name. The accounts are in my name. Desperate people get creative," Nenner warned. "Watch your mail, watch your accounts, and tell the staff that if a man named Derek Caldwell shows up, he is to be treated like a pharmaceutical rep with a bad product. Do not let him pass the waiting room." I nodded. I already scrubbed his tour from the schedule. "Keep scrubbing," Neener said. "They are going to try to bypass you." The rest of the week was a nightmare of psychological warfare. My mother sent me pictures of us when I was a baby with captions like "Simpler Times" and "Mommy Loves You." My father sent me links to articles about the importance of family businesses. Derek sent me nothing which was more unsettling than if he had sent threats. I focused on the work. I saw patients. I listened to loads. I prescribed antibiotics. I tried to drown out the noise of my personal life with the rhythm of professional duty, but the dread was always there, humming in the background like a faulty fluorescent light. It was Friday afternoon when the blow landed. I was at the front desk signing off on some lab requisition forms when the mail carrier walked in. "Afternoon, Doc," he said, dropping a stack of envelopes on the high counter. "Heavy load today." "Thanks, Jerry," I said. I sifted through the pile. Bills, junk mail, a medical journal, and then a thick white envelope with the official seal of the State Department of Assessments and Taxation. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't filed anything recently. Our annual report wasn't due for another 4 months. I picked up the envelope. It was addressed to me, but not at the clinic address. It was addressed to me at my parents' house, my old address from 5 years ago. It had been forwarded by the post office because I had a standing forwarding order. If I hadn't kept that forwarding order active, this letter would have gone straight to my father's hands. I tore it open. Inside was a confirmation of filing notice. Entity name Juniper Bridge Management Group, LLC. Filing date 2 days ago. Registered agent Derek Caldwell. Principal address 42. Oak Street, my parents' house. I froze. The name was almost identical. Juniper Bridge Management Group. To a layman, to a vendor, even to a bank. It would look like a subsidiary. It would look like part of my company. And then I saw the member list. Member Piper Holmes' signature on file. Member Derek Caldwell. I hadn't signed anything. I looked at the signature block on the photocopy included in the packet. There was my name. It was my signature. The loop of the P, the sharp cross of the H. It looked exactly like my handwriting, but I knew I hadn't held that pen. Nara walked up behind me. You look like you have seen a ghost. Piper, what is it? I handed her the paper. My hand was shaking so hard the paper rattled. They didn't just try the back window, I whispered. They broke the glass. They had forged my signature. They had created a shadow company using my name and my professional credibility. They were trying to build a vessel to siphon off my success, and they had done it with a level of criminal audacity that took my breath away. Nara looked at the document, her jaw tightening. This is fraud, she said flatly. Federal fraud if they try to open a bank account with this. They already have the LLC, I said, my voice sounding hollow to my own ears, which means they can apply for credit. They can sign contracts. They can ruin me. I remembered the email from the bank a week ago, the loan application I thought I had caught in time. I realize now that the loan application wasn't the only iron they had in the fire. That was just the clumsy attempt. This was the master plan. I stared at Derek's name on the official state document. He wasn't just a lazy brother anymore. He was an identity thief. And my parents, my sacrifice-making parents, had let him use their address as the headquarters for the crime. I didn't cry. The sadness that had been lingering in my chest evaporated, burned away by a white-hot clarity. Nina, I said, folding the paper and sliding it into my pocket. Cancel my last patient. Where are you going? She asked. I need to make a phone call. I said, and it isn't to my mother. I walked back to my office and closed the door. I looked at the black notebook where I had written the family stays on the sidelines. I picked up a pen and drew a line through it. I wrote a new rule underneath. When they break the law, they are not family. They are defendants. I reached for the phone to call the lawyer I hadn't spoken to since the lease signing. The time for gray rocking was over. It was time to drop the hammer. I sat at my desk, the glow of the monitor illuminating the darkened office. My fingers flew across the keyboard, navigating the state's business registry website with a speed born of panic. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed to confirm that the piece of paper in my pocket was real and not some twisted hallucination brought on by stress. I typed in the search query Juniper Bridge. The results populated in less than a second. There was my company, Juniper Bridge Clinic LLC, status active, good standing, and right below it, like a malignant tumor that had grown overnight, was the new entry Juniper Bridge Management Group LLC. I clicked on the filing history. The articles of organization had been submitted electronically 48 hours ago. I downloaded the PDF and zoomed in on the details. The registered agent was Derek Caldwell. The address was 42 Oak Street, my parents' house. But it was the signature page that made the room spin. There at the bottom was my name, Piper Holmes. It was my signature. I knew the loop of the P and the sharp, aggressive cross of the H better than I knew my own face. It was identical to how I signed prescriptions. But I had not signed this. I had not been in a room with Derek or a notary. I had not authorized the creation of a management group. I was staring at a felony. Before I could even process the betrayal, the phone on my desk rang. It was the private line, the one only vendors and banks used. I picked it up, my hand trembling slightly. Doctor, Olms, Doctor. Olms, this is Sarah, First Stone Community Bank. The voice on the other end said she sounded cheerful, efficient. I am just calling to verify the equipment details on the loan application for the new entity. Mr. Caldwell noted that you wanted to expedite the purchase of the portable ultrasound machines, but the invoice number he provided seems to be missing a digit. My blood turned to ice. What loan application? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. The one for Juniper Bridge Management Group, Sarah said, her cheerfulness faltering slightly. For $50,000. Mr. Caldwell, your partner, said you two were splitting the operations and clinical sides to protect assets. He is listed as the guarantor, but since the LLC references your primary clinic, we just needed to cross-check the collateral. $50,000. They weren't just setting up a shell company. They were actively trying to leverage my reputation to borrow money that I knew with absolute certainty Derek would blow on a salary for himself and a lease BMW within a week. Sarah, I said, gripping the phone so hard the plastic creaked. Listen to me very carefully. I did not authorize that loan. I am not a member of that LLC. Mr. Caldwell is not my partner. He is committing fraud. There was a long, stunned silence on the other end. I see, Sarah stammered, the professional veneer shattering. Dr. Holmes, the paperwork has your signature. The signature is forged, I said. Cancel the application. Flag the account. If 1 cent is disbursed to Derek Caldwell, I will sue the bank for negligence. Do you understand? Yes, she whispered. I am flagging it now. I am so sorry. I hung up. I didn't feel relief. I felt a cold, hard clarity. This wasn't a family squabble anymore. This wasn't about boundaries or guilt trips. My father and brother were trying to steal my identity. They were trying to bankrupt me before I had even finished paying off my student loans. I grabbed my purse and the printouts. Nina, I called out as I walked into the hallway. Nora looked up from a stack of charts. She saw my face and stood up immediately. Lock the doors, I said. Change the passwords on the scheduling software. Call the IT guy and tell him to force a reset on every account, and if anyone from my family calls, you tell them I am with legal counsel on it. Nar said. She didn't ask questions. She just reached for the phone. I drove straight to the law offices of Alyssa Vane. Alyssa was not a family friend. She was not someone I met at a barbecue. She was a shark in a silk blouse, recommended to me by a colleague who had survived a nasty partnership dissolution. Her office was in the glass tower downtown, a world away from my strip mall clinic. I threw the papers onto her mahogany desk. They filed an LLC in my name, I said without preamble, and they tried to take out a $50,000 loan this morning. Alyssa picked up the documents. She scanned them with eyes that had seen every variety of corporate greed. She didn't look shocked. She looked focused. This signature, she said, tapping the page. It looks authentic. It is mine, I said, but I didn't write it. Not on this tracing, Alyssa said, or a digital lift. It is clumsy, but effective enough to fool a clerk at the state office who processes 500 of these a day. She leaned back in her chair. Okay, Piper, here is the reality. This is identity theft. It is forgery. It is bank fraud. If we report this to the police, your brother goes to jail. Your father, if he is involved, could be charged as an accomplice. She looked at me, waiting for the flinch, waiting for the "but he is my brother's" speech. I don't care about jail, I said. I care about my clinic. I care that they are trying to sink my ship to build their raft. Stop them. We go nuclear, Alyssa said. We file an immediate injunction against the new LLC. We send a cease and desist to Derek and your parents. We notify the credit bureaus to freeze your personal credit. We file an affidavit of forgery with the Secretary of State to dissolve the entity. Do it, I said. There is one thing, Alyssa said, frowning as she held the forged document up to the light. The signature. It has a specific tell. See the way the S in Holmes trails off. You don't sign like that anymore. I checked your current contracts. Your S is sharper now. I looked closer. She was right. The signature on the fraudulent document was rounder, softer. It looked like how I signed things 5 years ago. They lifted it from an old document. Alyssa concluded. Do they have access to your old files? I felt a pit open in my stomach. My mother, I said, she keeps everything. Report cards, tax returns. I filed when I was 20. She has a filing cabinet in the den. She gave it to him, Alyssa said, or she let him take it. The betrayal hit me harder than the fraud. My mother, the keeper of the family archive, had turned my history into a weapon for my brother. File the papers, I said, standing up. I want them to know. I know. I left Alyssa's office and went back to the clinic. I felt like I was preparing for a siege. I spent the next 3 hours with a security contractor. We installed cameras at the front desk, the back door, and the hallway. I paid extra for the cloud storage package. I changed the locks on the physical doors, replacing the standard tumblers with electronic keypads that required a code I memorized and wrote down nowhere. By 5:00, the clinic was a fortress. By 5:30, the phone call started. My cell phone lit up with my mother's picture. I let it go to voicemail. She called again immediately and again. I finally answered on the fourth ring. I needed to hear it. I needed to hear the justification. Piper. Her voice was shrill, panicked. Why is the bank calling, Derek? Why did you cancel the loan? He is down there right now, and they are threatening to call the police because he committed fraud. Mom, I said, staring at the monitor of the new security camera feed. He forged my signature. He didn't forge anything, she cried. He just borrowed it. He was going to explain it to you once the money came through. He wanted to surprise you with the new equipment. He is trying to help you grow, and you are treating him like a criminal. He is a criminal, I said, and so are you. If you gave him that signature, I gave him nothing. She sobbed. I just left the file cabinet open. I thought he was looking for his birth certificate. Piper, please. You have to call the bank. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. They are talking about federal charges. He is your brother. He should have thought about that before he tried to steal $50,000 in my name. I said, you are cold. She spat. You are ice cold. I don't know who you are anymore. I am the person paying for your retirement home one day, I said, or I was until today. I hung up. 10 minutes later, my father called. I answered. You ungrateful little witch, he growled. Hello, Dad, I said. You sent a lawyer, he shouted. A cease and desist order to my house to your own father. It is Derek's corporate headquarters, isn't it? I asked. 42 Oak Street. I just sent the mail to the address on the filing. He was building a legacy. My father roared. He was setting up the structure so we could all benefit. We were going to cut you in for 65%. We were being generous. And you go and humiliate us. Generous. I laughed, a harsh sound in the empty office. You were stealing my equity. You were stealing my credit. We are family, he yelled. Family doesn't steal family shares. You have plenty. You are swimming in it. Why are you so greedy? I am not going to argue with you, I said. The affidavit of forgery has been filed. The LLC will be dissolved by the state within 48 hours. If Derek tries to use my name again, I will press charges. Real ones. If you do that, my father said, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper, you are dead to us. Do you hear me? No Christmas, no birthdays. You will be an orphan. I think, I said, looking around my clinic, the walls I painted, the floors I scrubbed, the business I built, while they laughed at me. I have been an orphan for a long time. I just didn't realize it until now. I ended the call. I sat there in the silence. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. My computer pinged. It was an email from Alyssa. Subject forensic update. I opened it. Piper, we confirmed the source of the signature. It wasn't a tax return. It matches the cosigner agreement for your first student loan from 12 years ago, the one your mother kept in her keepsake box. I closed my eyes. That loan, the one I had paid off 2 years early, eating rice and beans to clear the debt so my parents wouldn't be liable. The document that represented my struggle to be free of them was the exact document they used to try and shackle me back down. It was poetic in a sick way. I looked at the phone. They would keep calling. They would show up. My father would come here and pound on the glass. Derek would come and cry or threaten. I couldn't live like this. I couldn't run a medical practice looking over my shoulder every time a car pulled into the lot. I needed to end it. And I couldn't end it with a restraining order. Paper meant nothing to them. They thought they were above the law because they were family. I needed to show them that I was not their daughter anymore. I was an institution, and institutions do not negotiate with terrorists. I picked up the phone and dialed Alyssa. "Don't file the police report yet," I said. "Why?" she asked, sounding concerned. "Piper, don't tell me you are getting cold feet." "No," I said. "I am getting angry. If I send the police, they will play the victim. They will tell the town I had my brother arrested over a misunderstanding. I need them to admit it. I need them to say it out loud in front of witnesses." "What do you want to do?" Alyssa asked. "Set a meeting." I said, "Tell them I am willing to negotiate the family agreement. Tell them to come to the clinic tomorrow night. All of them." "Piper, this is dangerous," Alyssa warned. "They are volatile." "I know." I said, "That is why you are going to be there. And bring the bank officer, and bring the notary lock. You are setting a trap." Alyssa said slowly. "No," I said, looking at the black notebook on my desk where I had crossed out the word family. "I am holding a closing. I am closing the deal on my past." "Okay," Alyssa said. "I will set it up tomorrow at 7. I hung up. I walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the asphalt. I was done running. I was done hiding. Tomorrow they were coming to take my clinic, but they were going to find out that the only thing waiting for them was the bill. I sent the text message at exactly 2:00 in the afternoon. I typed it out 3 times, deleting and rewriting until the tone was perfectly ambiguous. It needed to sound like a surrender without actually promising anything. "I am ready to discuss the family involvement. Please come to the clinic at 7 this evening. I will have the paperwork ready." I hit send. Then I put the phone face down on my desk and looked at Alyssa Vane. "They are going to think you are folding," Alyssa said. She was sitting across from me, her posture perfect, a stark contrast to the chaos inside my head. On the desk between us lay a small digital recorder and a stack of file folders. "I know," I said. "That is the point. I need them to come in with their guard down. If they think they are walking into a fight, they will bring their own lawyer, or worse, my father will bring his business associates to intimidate me. I need them to think they are coming to a coronation. The recording laws in this state are one-party consent," Alyssa reminded me, tapping the small black device. "As long as you are part of the conversation, you can record it. But to be safe and to make sure this holds up if we have to go to a civil trial for the identity theft, I want you to place this on the desk in plain sight. Do not hide it. If they ask, say it is for the minutes." "Minutes," I repeated. "For a family meeting." "It is not a family meeting anymore, Piper," Alyssa said, her voice sharp. "It is a shareholder dispute. Treat it like one." She stood up and smoothed her skirt. "I have drafted the cease and desist letters. I have the affidavit of forgery ready for you to notarize. I will be in the conference room next door. If things get out of hand or if they threaten you physically, I come in. Otherwise, I stay out. You need to get them to admit to the filing on tape. Can you do that?" "I can do that," I said. Alyssa left. I walked out to the front desk. Nar Hart was there aggressively organizing a stack of insurance claim forms. She looked up as I approached. "They are coming at 7, I told her. "Do you want me to stay?" Nar asked. Her hand moved instinctively to the heavy stapler on her desk as if she were weighing it as a defensive weapon. "No," I said. "This needs to be just us. But I need you to lock everything down before you leave. I mean everything. Physical files in the cabinets, the server room. Put a passcode on the copier if you have to. I don't want Derek wandering off to use the bathroom and walking out with a patient list." "I already changed the Wi-Fi password," Nar said grimly. "And I told the evening cleaning crew to skip tonight. You won't be disturbed." She paused, looking at me with a softness I rarely saw. "Dr. Holmes, do not let them make you feel small in your own building. You built this place. They are just guests." "I know," I said. "Go home meaner." At 6:55, the headlights swept across the front window. I was sitting in the conference room, a glass-walled space near the entrance that I usually used for vendor meetings. I had set the stage carefully. I sat at the head of the long oval table. On the table, I had placed 3 bottles of water and a single thick folder. The digital recorder was sitting on top of the folder, its red light already blinking steady and silent. The front door chime rang. I didn't get up to greet them. I waited. They walked in a minute later. My father led the way. Of course, he was wearing his Sunday suit, the navy blue one with the gold buttons. He looked expansive, victorious. He looked like a man who had just won a poker game he had rigged from the start. Derek followed him, wearing a button-down shirt that was untucked, trying to look casual, but failing to hide the nervous energy vibrating off him. He was scanning the room, looking at the framed medical degrees on the wall, the expensive ergonomic chairs, the polished floors. He was calculating the value of everything he saw. And then there was my mother. She was carrying a Tupperware container. "Piper," she exclaimed, her voice echoing in the empty clinic. "Oh, it feels so cold in here. Don't you turn up the heat at night?" She walked over and set the container on the table. Through the sheer plastic, I could see it was a crumb cake. "I made your favorite," she said, smiling as if the last 48 hours of threats and fraud had never happened. I thought we could have something sweet while we signed the papers. A little celebration. "Sit down," I said. My father pulled out the chair at the opposite end of the table, directly facing me. He unbuttoned his jacket and sat with a heavy sigh of satisfaction. "I am glad you came around, Piper," he said. "I told your mother you would. You are a smart girl. You know that fighting family is a losing proposition." Derek sat next to him, spinning his phone on the table. "Yet, sis. No hard feelings, right? It was just business." "Business," I repeated flatly. "Exactly," my father said. "Now I'd assume you have the partnership agreement ready. We can get Derek's equity transfer started tonight. And I was thinking we should set up a weekly strategy meeting. Tuesdays work best for me." He reached for the water bottle, twisting the cap with a sharp crack. "Before we sign anything," I said, my voice low and steady, "I have a few administrative questions just to clear up the current corporate structure." Sure, Derek said, leaning back and putting his hands behind his head. "Ask away." "Boss," he smirked at the word boss. I looked him dead in the eye. "Who filed the articles of organization for the Juniper Bridge Management Group 2 days ago?" The smirk vanished. Derek's eyes flicked to my father, then back to me. He stopped spinning his phone. "I don't know what you are talking about," Derek said. It was a reflex lie, the kind a child tells when caught with a hand in the cookie jar. "Strange," I said, "because the Secretary of State seems to think you do. Your name is listed as the registered agent." My father cleared his throat. "Piper, don't get hung up on technicalities." Derek was just being proactive. "We knew we were coming to an agreement. So he just got the ball rolling on the paperwork. It shows initiative. That is exactly the kind of go-getter attitude you need in a COO. "Initiative," I said. "Is that what we are calling forgery now?" "Forgery is a strong word," my father said, his voice hardening. "It was a placeholder, a formality, and the loan application." I asked. "The $50,000 equipment loan from First Stone Community Bank. Was that also a formality?" The room went dead silent. Derek looked at the table. He hadn't told Dad about the loan. I could tell by the way my father's jaw tightened. My father knew about the LOC, but the loan was Derek freelancing. I needed startup capital. Derek mumbled. "For the management side, computers, office supplies." "I didn't want to ask you for cash up front, so you stole my identity instead," I said. "He didn't steal anything," my mother interjected. She looked frantic, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "He was going to pay it back. He just wanted to surprise you with how prepared he was. Why do you always have to twist everything into something ugly?" I didn't answer her. I reached for the folder in front of me. I opened it slowly, deliberately. I laid the papers out on the table, sliding them across the polished wood until they rested in front of my father. The first was the print out from the state registry showing the fraudulent LC. The second was the email from the bank flagging the loan for fraud. The third was the forensic analysis of the signature showing the match to the student loan document from 12 years ago. "This is not initiative," I said, my voice remaining perfectly level. "This is a felony in this state. Identity theft involving a sum over $10,000 carries a mandatory minimum sentence of 3 years in prison." My father looked down at the papers. He didn't read them. He just stared at them as if they were radioactive. "You audited us," he whispered. The disbelief in his voice was genuine. He couldn't conceive of a world where I would investigate him. I protected myself. I corrected him. "You would send your brother to jail," my mother cried. She stood up, knocking her chair back. "Over a signature. Over some paperwork. Piper, look at me. This is your brother. He held your hand when you were scared of the dark. He is family." "He isn't acting like family," I said. "He is acting like a parasite." "Enough." My father slammed his hand on the table. The water bottles jumped. "I have had enough of this disrespect. You think because you have a fancy office and a lawyer that you can dictate terms to me. I am your father. I made you." "You didn't make me," I said. "You tolerated me until I became profitable. We are doing this," he hissed, pointing a finger at my face. "You are going to sign the partnership agreement. You are going to validate that LLC, and you are going to call the bank and tell them it was a clerical error, because if you don't, everyone in this town is going to know what kind of cold-hearted you really are. I will tell them you abandoned us. I will tell them you treat your patients like ATMs. I will ruin your reputation." I looked at him for the first time in 34 years. I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel the need to apologize. I looked at this man, this small, angry man in his Sunday suit, and I realized he had no power over me. His threats were the tantrums of a king whose castle had turned out to be made of sand. I tapped the digital recorder. "Everything you just said is on tape," I said. My father froze. His eyes locked onto the small black device. And I continued, "My attorney, Alyssa Vane, is in the next room. She has draft copies of these criminal complaints ready to file. The only reason she hasn't walked in here with the police is because I asked her to give you one chance to walk away." Derek looked like he was going to be sick. He slumped in his chair. All the bravado drained out of him. "Dad," he whined. "Dad, she recorded us." My mother looked from me to the recorder, and then her face crumpled, but she didn't apologize. She didn't say, "I'm sorry we tried to rob you." "It is because you moved away," she sobbed, wiping her eyes with a napkin. "If you had stayed close, if you had come for Sunday dinners, none of this would be happening. You made us do this. You made us desperate because you shut us out." It was the ultimate gaslight. Blaming the victim for the crime, I stood up. "The meeting is over," I said. I picked up the recorder and slipped it into my pocket. "Here is the new deal," I said, looking down at them. "There is no partnership. There is no job for Derek. There is no monthly stipend. You are going to sign the dissolution papers for the fake LLC by tomorrow morning, or I file the police report. And you are never ever going to use my name or the name of my clinic for any financial transaction again. And if we don't," my father challenged, though his voice was weaker now, "then I will see you in court," I said. "And I will win because I have the receipts." I walked to the door of the conference room and held it open. "Get out," I said. My father stood up slowly. He adjusted his jacket, trying to regain some shred of dignity. He looked at me with a hatred so pure it almost took my breath away. "You are going to regret this," he said. "You think money keeps you warm at night. You are going to be a very lonely woman, Piper." "I would rather be lonely than looted," I said. He walked past me. Derek followed, not making eye contact, scurrying like a frightened rat. My mother paused at the door. She looked at the crumb cake still sitting on the table. "You didn't even taste the cake," she whispered. "Take it with you," I said. She stared at me for a long moment, a look of profound confusion on her face, as if she was trying to reconcile the compliant daughter she raised with the woman standing before her. Then she turned and walked out. I locked the front door behind them. I engaged the deadbolt. I watched through the glass as they got into my father's car. They argued in the driveway for a moment. I saw my father gesticulating wildly at Derek before they drove off into the night. I leaned my forehead against the cool glass. My adrenaline was crashing, leaving me shaking. Alyssa stepped out of the back office. She walked over and stood beside me. "You did good," she said quietly. "You held the line." They really believe they are the victims, I said. Did you hear my mother? She blamed me for moving out. Narcissists rewrite reality to fit their feelings, Alyssa said. But the law deals in facts and you have the facts. Is it over? I asked. Alyssa looked out at the empty parking lot. Legally, we have them cornered. But personally, people like that don't take a loss gracefully. They will try to find a way to hurt you that doesn't require a signature. She was right. I went home that night and didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I knew my father. I knew that when he couldn't control something, he tried to destroy it. The retaliation didn't take long. It arrived the next morning at 10:15. I was in exam room 2 with a patient who had a sinus infection when Nenner knocked on the door. This was a violation of protocol. NAR never interrupted a patient exam unless the building was on fire. I excused myself and stepped into the hallway. NAR's face was pale. She was holding a fax that had just come through. What is it? I asked. It is from the State Insurance Commission, NAR said, her voice trembling, and a copy from Blue Cross Blue Shield. I took the paper. Notice of investigation. Re-anonymous complaint of fraudulent billing and phantom services. Dr. Holmes. We have received a credible whistleblower complaint alleging that Juniper Bridge Clinic has been billing for services not rendered and upcoding patient visits for the past 18 months, effective immediately. All reimbursement payments to your clinic are suspended pending a full audit. I stared at the paper, a credible whistleblower. They didn't just key my car. I whispered. They called the cops on my livelihood. My father hadn't gone to the police. He had gone to the one place that could shut me down faster than a judge. He had reported me for insurance fraud, the cardinal sin of medicine. And because he knew my operations, because Derek had seen enough of the inside, they knew exactly what keywords to use to trigger an immediate freeze. I looked at Nenner. Cancel the afternoon. I said we are going to war. The letter from the State Insurance Commission was not just a piece of paper. It was a tourniquet applied directly to the jugular vein of my business. In the medical world, we are trained to deal with hemorrhage. We know how to stitch, how to cauterize, how to transfuse, but there is no suture kick for a reputation bleed. The notice stated that due to credible allegations of systemic upcoding and billing for phantom services, all reimbursements from the major state-backed plans were effectively frozen pending a comprehensive audit. That meant 60% of my revenue stream stopped overnight. The money was terrifying. Yes, I had savings, but peril for my staff, rent, and the lease on the new ultrasound machines burned through $15,000 a month without the insurance checks. I had perhaps 3 months of runway before I hit the wall, but the money was not the worst part. The worst part was the accusation itself. To a doctor, the word fraud is a death sentence. It implies not just greed, but a violation of the sacred trust between provider and patient. It suggests that I looked at a sick person and saw a dollar sign. My family knew this. They knew that attacking my bank account would hurt, but attacking my ethics would destroy me. For the first 3 nights after the notice arrived, I did not sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every single chart I had signed in the last year. Had I accidentally billed a level 4 visit as a level 5? Had I documented the smoking cessation counseling clearly enough in an audit? A simple clerical error is not treated as a mistake. It is treated as evidence of intent. If the auditors found a pattern of error, even a benign one, I could lose my medical license. I could be barred from practicing medicine in the state. 7 years of medical school and residency. 4 years of building Juniper Bridge. All erased because my father was throwing a tantrum. Then the whisper started. Stone is not a metropolis. It is a town where news travels faster than a virus. On Tuesday morning, Mrs. Gable, my first loyal patient, the woman whose life I had saved, called the front desk. I need to cancel my checkup next week, she told the receptionist. Her voice was tight, uncomfortable. Is everything okay, Mrs. Gable? The receptionist asked. We can reschedule. No, she said. I think I'm going to try the urgent care center on the highway. I just heard some things about the billing. I don't want to get involved in any legal trouble. I was standing right there. I heard it. It wasn't just her. 3 more cancellations came in before lunch. I didn't have to guess the source. Narhart went to the grocery store on her lunch break and came back with a face like thunder. "Your brother is at the coffee shop on Main Street," she told me, slamming her purse onto the breakroom table. "He is holding court, telling anyone who will listen that he is so worried about you." "What is he saying?" I asked, looking up from a stack of patient files I was frantically reviewing. "He is saying that you are having a breakdown." Nar said, her voice shaking with rage. "He says the success was too much for you, and that the family tried to step in to help manage the books, but you pushed them away. He is implying that the financial irregularities are a result of you not being mentally stable." I closed my eyes. It was brilliant. It was evil, but it was brilliant. He wasn't painting me as a criminal. That would make him look vengeful. He was painting me as a hysterical woman who couldn't handle the pressure. He was playing the concerned brother who had tried to save the sinking ship, effectively validating the anonymous complaint without ever admitting he sent it. "He is poisoning the well," I whispered. "He is trying to starve you out," Nar said. "He thinks if the patients leave and the money stops, you will come crawling back to him to fix it." I looked at my hands. They were trembling, not from fear, but from the sheer exhaustion of fighting a war on 2 fronts, one against the auditors and one against my own blood. I remembered being 10 years old, trying to build a complex Lego castle in the living room. Derek had come in and kicked it over, scattering the pieces everywhere. When I cried, my mother had come in, not to scold him, but to hug me and say, "It's okay, honey. You were spending too much time on that anyway. Come help me in the kitchen." The pattern was always the same: create a disaster, then offer a sanctuary that required submission. They broke my things, so they could be the only ones to hold me while I cried. They wanted me to break now. They wanted me to be so terrified of the audit, so humiliated by the rumors, that I would sign their family agreement just to make the pain stop. They expected me to call my father and beg for his protection against the big bad insurance commission. I opened my eyes. "I am not crawling," I said. I stood up and walked to the whiteboard in the break room. I picked up a red marker. "Nina," I said, "we are going to do a 100% internal audit. Every chart, every claim, every coding line from the last 24 months. We are going to find every mistake before the state does. That is thousands of files." Nar said it will take weeks. "We do it at night." I said we do it on weekends. "I will pay everyone double overtime. But when that auditor walks through the door, I want to hand him a binder that is cleaner than a surgical theater." "Okay," Nar said, a fierce smile touching her lips. "I will order the pizza." For the next 10 days, the clinic became a bunker. We worked from 7:00 in the morning until midnight. My staff, 3 nurses, 2 receptionists, and Nenner stayed with me. They didn't have to. They could have quit. The rumors were scary for them, too, but they stayed. They stayed because I had paid for their continuing education classes. They stayed because I gave them bonuses when we were profitable. They stayed because loyalty is earned, not demanded by birthright. We found errors, small ones. A missed signature here, a wrong date there. We corrected them. We flagged them, he added. We wrote explanatory memos for each one, but I knew that being clean wasn't enough. I needed to prove that the complaint was malicious. I hired a forensic compliance auditor named Mr. Lance. He cost $300 an hour. Money I didn't have, but I put it on my personal credit card. Mr. Vance was a small man with thick glasses and a personality like a dial tone. He arrived on a Thursday, set up his laptop in the conference room, and plugged into our server. "I am not just looking at the billing," he told me. "I am looking at the system integrity. If someone filed a whistleblower complaint, they usually claim to have inside knowledge. I want to know if anyone has been looking at your data who shouldn't be." He worked for 2 days in silence. On the 3rd afternoon, he called me into the conference room. "Doctor, for Holmes," he said, turning his laptop screen toward me. "I found an anomaly in the billing." I asked, bracing myself. "No," he said, "in the access logs." He pointed to a line of code that meant nothing to me. "Your scheduling and billing software is cloud-based," he explained. "It allows remote access if you have the administrator credentials. Most of the login come from your IP address here At the clinic or your IP address at your apartment? Right. I said I work from home sometimes. However, Mr. Vance continued, 3 weeks ago, there was a login attempt from a device that had never connected to the system before, an iPhone. The user attempted to log in using the account admin. I don't use the admin account. I said, I use my own username. The admin account was the default from when we installed the system 4 years ago. Exactly. Mr. Vance said the password for that account was never changed from the factory default. It was likely something simple or written in the manual. I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. The manual. I kept the original software manuals in a binder on the shelf in the back office. Did they get in? I asked. Yes, Mr. Vance said. They logged in for 12 minutes. They didn't change any records. They just navigated through the financial summary pages and the patient demographic export screen. They were mining data, I whispered, and Mr. Vance added, they took screenshots. The system logs a screen capture event when the mobile app is used in that way. Can you trace the IP address? I asked. I already did. Mr. Vance said it resolves to a residential internet service provider. The subscriber address is 42 Oak Street, my parents' house. I stared at the screen. The date of the login was the same night as the peaceful lasagna dinner, the night Derek had left the table early to use the restroom. He hadn't gone to the bathroom. He had gone to my car. I remembered now. I had left my work bag in the hallway of their house, stupidly trusting. Inside that bag was my laptop and sometimes the binder with my administrative notes. Or maybe he had just guessed. Maybe he had seen me type a code once. But then another memory surfaced, a sharper one. The night Derek toured the clinic, the unauthorized visit I caught on the calendar in Part 4. I had kennelled it, but he had been there before that. He had dropped by just to say hi a week prior to that. While I was busy with a patient, I had left him in the back office to wait for me. I had found him sitting at my desk looking at his phone, just checking my fantasy football scores. He had said, smiling, that lazy smile on my desk taped to the side of the monitor. A habit Nar hated and constantly scolded me for was a small yellow sticky note. It didn't have the password, but it had the server URL and the default admin ID written on it because I sometimes needed it for tech support calls. He hadn't just been checking football. He had been photographing my workspace. He used the default login, I said, my voice hard. He logged in from his phone during dinner to verify the revenue numbers before they presented me with the contract. That is how they knew I was making $700,000. My father said, we looked at the numbers you sent to Cousin Greg, but that was a lie. Greg never saw my PL statement. Derek stole it. Mr. Vance adjusted his glasses. Dr. Ulm's unauthorized access to a protected health information system is a federal offense under HIPAA. It is also a violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. This isn't just a family dispute. This is cyber trespassing. Can you prove it was him? I asked. The device ID is unique. Mr. Vance said, if we subpoena his phone, we will find the screenshots. I sat back in the chair. I had them. I had the forgery. I had the bank fraud. And now I had proof that they had hacked my medical record system to spy on my finances. The whistleblower complaint was based on information he likely misunderstood or fabricated from that brief, illicit look at my books. He had seen adjustments on the ledger and assumed it meant fraud, not realizing that insurance write-offs are a standard part of medical billing. He had tried to destroy me with a weapon he didn't understand, and in doing so, he had left his fingerprints all over the gun. Print the logs. I said to Mr. Vance, print everything. I walked out of the conference room and found Nenner. She was on the phone with a patient, her voice soothing but firm. She hung up and looked at me. We have the audit ready, she said. We are clean, Piper. We found 3 errors totaling $40. We wrote a refund check to the insurance company already. Good, I said. Keep the team focused. The state auditor is coming on Monday. And the family? She asked. I touched the pocket where I had put the flash drive Mr. Vance gave me. I am going to get a restraining order, I said, and I am going to file a civil suit for defamation and corporate espionage. "Is that enough?" Nar asked. "They will just deny it. They will say you forged the logs." "No," I said, "it isn't enough." I looked out the window at the town of Stoneball. I saw the church steeple, the grocery store, the high school football field. This was their kingdom. My father's reputation was his currency here. He thrived on being the good neighbor, the family man, the martyr who sacrificed for his children. Taking him to court would be a messy private battle. He would spin it. He would play the victim. I needed something more absolute. I needed to dismantle the lie. "I am not just going to sue them," I said, a plan forming in my mind, sharp and cold as a scalpel. "I am going to let them hang themselves." "How?" Nar asked. "They want a meeting." I said, "They want to settle this before the audit destroys me. My father sent me a text this morning. He said he knows a guy at the Insurance Commission who can make the investigation go away if I sign the partnership agreement." "He is bluffing," Nar said. "I know." I said, "But I'm going to pretend I believe him." I turned back to the conference room. "I am going to invite them back," I said, "but this time it won't be in the clinic where the audit hearing." I said, "I am going to invite them to the official state audit hearing." Nar's eyes went wide. "Piper, that is insane. That is a closed proceeding." "Not if I designate them as my management consultants," I said, a dangerous smile spreading across my face. "They wanted to be part of the management team, right? They filed the LOC. They claimed the title. I am going to let them have it. I am going to put them in the room with the state investigators," I continued, "and I am going to let them explain why the records they accessed illegally don't match the lies they told the whistleblower." I took a deep breath. "They want to be owners," I said. "Fine. Then they can answer for the company." It was the ultimate gamble. If it went wrong, they could sink me right there in the room. But if it went right, it would be the most public, undeniable exposure of their incompetence and malice that Stoneball had ever seen. I picked up my phone and typed a reply to my father. "Dad, you win. I can't handle the audit alone. If you can really help, come to the clinic on Monday morning. We will go to the hearing together. I need my family." I hit send. The trap was set. And this time, there was no exit door. I thought I was walking into a negotiation. I thought I was walking into a room where we would discuss the terms of my surrender regarding the state audit, a ruse I had carefully cultivated to get them into the light. But when I stepped into my parents' living room that Sunday afternoon, I realized immediately that this was not a negotiation. It was a tribunal. The furniture had been rearranged. The comfortable armchairs in the sofa were arranged in a tight semicircle facing a single wooden dining chair placed in the center of the rug. It looked like an intervention or perhaps a witch trial from the 17th century. My father sat in the center of the semicircle, the presiding judge. My mother was to his right, clutching a tissue. Derek was to his left, looking somber and misunderstood. And flanking them were the jurors, and Linder, Uncle Mike, and my cousin Greg. "Sit down, Piper," my father said. He did not point to the sofa. He pointed to the wooden chair. I didn't sit. I remained standing near the doorway, clutching my purse. Inside that purse was my phone, which was currently recording, and a folder of evidence that was burning a hole in the leather. "I thought we were discussing the audit strategy," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "I didn't know we were having a reunion." "The audit is just a symptom," my father said, his voice deep and resonant, the voice he used when he wanted to command a room. "The disease is your attitude. We are here to fix the root cause before you lose everything." "We are here because we love you," my mother chimed in, her voice trembling. "We can't watch you destroy this family anymore." I looked at the faces of my relatives. Aunt Linder looked disappointed. Uncle Mike looked uncomfortable, staring at his shoes. Cousin Greg, the tax accountant who had supposedly seen my numbers, wouldn't meet my eyes. "Okay," I said, "I am listening." My father leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "For the last month," he began, addressing the room rather than me, "we have watched Piper spiral. We have watched her take a family success story and turn it into a vehicle for her own ego. We have tried to help. We have offered guidance. We have offered manpower." He gestured to Derek. Derek here stepped up. My father continued. He saw his sister drowning in work. He saw the administrative cracks forming. He offered to come on board as a partner to share the load to bring his business acumen to the table. I looked at Derek. His business acumen consisted of 3 maxed-out credit cards and a failed drop-shipping scheme. "And how did you respond, Piper?" my father asked, turning his gaze on me like a spotlight. "Did you thank him? Did you welcome the help?" "No, you locked him out. You threatened him with lawyers. You treated your own brother like a trespasser." "He was trespassing," I said. "See," Derek said, throwing his hands up. "She is doing it again. She thinks she owns the world. She thinks she is better than us." My father said, "That is the tragedy here. Piper has forgotten who paid for the braces on her teeth. She has forgotten who co-signed her first car loan. She thinks because she has doctor in front of her name, she is exempt from the laws of family loyalty." "I haven't forgotten anything," I said. "Then why are you hoarding it?" Aunt Linda spoke up. Her voice was sharp. "Your father told us you are making nearly $1 million a year, and you are charging your parents for a Sunday dinner. You are refusing to give your brother a salary. It doesn't sound like the Piper I used to babysit." So that was the narrative. I was the miser. I was Scrooge. And they were the Cratchits. "I am not hoarding," I said. "I am reinvesting, and I am paying off debts." "We are your debt," my father roared, standing up. The sudden movement made Uncle Mike flinch. "You owe us. We are the equity holders of your life. You think you built that clinic. We built you. Therefore, we built the clinic." He began to pace in front of the semicircle. "We are not asking for much," he said, holding up a hand, as if he were being incredibly reasonable. "We are simply asking for what is fair, a restructuring, 35% ownership for Derek so he has a future, a modest monthly stipend for your mother and me so we can retire with dignity, and a seat on the board for me so I can ensure you don't make any more catastrophic mistakes like this insurance audit." There it was, the demand list laid out in front of witnesses, so that if I refused, I would be the villain who denied her parents a dignified retirement. I looked at them. I looked at Derek, who was nodding vigorously. "I just want to work," Derek said, his voice thick with fake emotion. "I want to help build the brand. I have so many ideas. Aunt Linda, I was going to launch a whole wellness app linked to the clinic, but Piper, she just shut me down. She said I wasn't smart enough." "I never said that," I said. "I said you weren't qualified." "Same thing to you," Derek sneered. I took a deep breath. I needed them to say it. I needed the specifics on the record. "So," I said, looking directly at my father, "to be clear, you want me to transfer 35% of the Juniper Bridge Clinic LLC to Derek. You want $2,500 a month for you and Mom, and you want veto power over business decisions." "We want a family management agreement," my father corrected, "signed and notarized to stop this bleeding. If you sign it, I make a call to my contact at the Insurance Commission. The investigation goes away. We save your license. And if I don't, then we can't protect you," my father said, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. "And when the state takes your license, don't come crying to this house. We will have nothing left to give you." The room was silent. The ultimatum hung in the air like smoke. Then from the corner, Uncle Mike cleared his throat. "Bob," Uncle Mike said, addressing my father, 35% is a lot. That is what $300,000 in value if the numbers are right. It is an investment in the future," my father said quickly. "Right," Uncle Mike said, shifting in his chair. "But usually when you get equity, you buy in." "I mean, Piper put up the cash for the lease and the equipment." "Right. So how much capital is Derek putting in for the 35%? My heart leaped. Uncle Mike, the quiet mechanic who never caused trouble, had just asked the one question my father hadn't scripted. Derek froze. He looked at my father. "Well," Derek stammered, "I am putting in sweat equity. My time, my expertise." "Sweat equity." Uncle Mike frowned. "For a third of the company. Piper worked 4 years for that. Seems a bit steep for what is it you do again. Derek, he brings intangibles." My mother snapped, cutting Mike off. Her face was flushed. "Why is everyone counting pennies? We are talking about keeping the family together. Derek has been working behind the scenes for months. He set up the management group. He secured the financing for the new machines. I stiffened. He secured the financing. She had just admitted it. She had admitted they secured financing. That meant the loan application. My phone buzzed in my purse. A long-sustained vibration. I ignored it. I was watching my father. He looked annoyed at my mother's outburst. He didn't want the details of the financing discussed in front of cousin Greg, who actually knew how loans worked. The point is, my father said loudly, steering the ship back on course. Derek has taken initiative. He has proven he can act like an owner, unlike Piper, who acts like a terrified employee. My phone buzzed again and again. I reached into my bag. Piper, put the phone away, my father commanded. We are not done. It might be the auditor. I lied. I pulled the phone out. It wasn't the auditor. It was a text message from Alyssa Vane, and below it was an image file, a PDF screenshot. Alyssa Vane, Piper, do not sign anything. We just got the full subpoena return from the bank regarding the fraudulent loan application. Alyssa Vane. It wasn't just Derek. Look at the guarantor line. I tapped the image. It expanded. It was the loan document for $50,000. I saw Derek's signature as the applicant, but right below it, on the line for cosigner guarantor, was a signature I had seen on birthday cards for 34 years, Robert Caldwell, and below his signature in the field for collateral was listed primary residence 42 Oak Street. The world stopped spinning. For weeks, I had assumed this was Derek's con. I thought my father was just the enabler, the blind patriarch protecting his idiot son. I thought he was bullying me to cover for Derek's mistakes. I was wrong. Derek couldn't get a $50,000 loan. His credit score was in the basement. The bank would have laughed him out of the building. My father knew that. My father had co-signed. My father had put up his own house, the house we were sitting in right now, as collateral to help Derek steal my business. This wasn't Derek's plan. This was their plan. My father wasn't protecting Derek. He was using Derek as a front to stage a hostile takeover of my assets. He wanted the stipend because he had likely over-leveraged himself on the truck and other debts. He wanted the control because he couldn't stand that his retirement plan had escaped his grip. I looked up from the phone. My father was still talking, gesturing with his hands, pontificating about duty and honor. We have to make sacrifices, he was saying. I have made them all my life. Now it is your turn. I looked at him, really looked at him. I didn't see a father. I saw a failed businessman who was trying to liquidate his daughter to cover his losses. The rage that had been burning in me for weeks suddenly went cold. It crystallized into something sharp and deadly. I laughed. It was a short, dry sound, but it cut through my father's monologue like a gunshot. Something funny? My father asked, his eyes narrowing. Yes, I said you. I stepped forward, moving away from the door and into the center of the circle. I stood directly in front of my father. You talk about sacrifices, I said. You talk about honesty. I am the most honest man in this room, he spat. Really? I asked. Then tell Uncle Mike about the loan. My father blinked. A flicker of genuine fear crossed his face. Gone in an instant, but I saw it. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. The $50,000 loan from First Stone Community Bank, I said clearly, making sure Aunt Linda heard every syllable. The one taken out in the name of Juniper Bridge Management Group. The one that used my clinic's assets as collateral without my permission. That was a misunderstanding. Derek squeaked. Was it? I asked, turning to my father. Because I just got the file from the bank. And guess whose name is on the guarantor line? My father's face went from red to a pale waxen gray. You signed it, Dad. I said, you co-signed a fraudulent loan. You committed bank fraud with your son. You put this house, the house Mom loves, up as collateral for a crime. Aunt Linda gasped. Bob, is that true? She is lying. My mother screamed, jumping up. She is making it up. She is trying to divide us. I have the PDF on my phone, I said, holding it up. Does anyone want to see it? Cousin Greg stood up. Let me see. Sit down, Greg, my father shouted. He looked cornered. Farah, this is family business. It stays in this room. Identity theft is not family business. I said it is a felony, and you didn't just let Derek do it. You held the pen. I looked around the room. The tribunal had collapsed. Uncle Mike was looking at my father with horror. Aunt Linda was staring at her hands. Derek was shrinking into his chair, looking for an exit. My father looked at me. The mask of the benevolent patriarch was gone. There was only hate left. "You think you are so smart," he hissed. "You think you can come into my house and humiliate me." "I didn't come to humiliate you," I said. "I came to give you a choice." "I don't take choices from you." He said, "You will take this one." I said, "Because if you don't, the next time I show this document it won't be to Cousin Greg. It will be to the district attorney." "You wouldn't," my mother whispered. "He is your father and I am the victim," I said. "And I am done paying for your mistakes." I turned to the group. "The meeting is over," I said, "but the closing is tomorrow." I looked at my father, who was trembling with impotent rage. "You want to fix the audit?" I asked. "You want to settle the ownership? You want to talk about who owes what?" "Yes," he said through gritted teeth. "Fine," I said. "Tomorrow morning, 9:00 at the clinic." I paused, letting the silence stretch until it was painful. "Bring Mom, bring Derek, and bring your ID." "Why?" Derek asked, his voice trembling. "Because we are going to finish this," I said, "once and for all. And you are going to bring a lawyer, Dad." "Because I am bringing mine, and I am bringing the state auditor." "You can't bring the auditor," my father said, panic creeping into his voice. "That is a private investigation." "Not anymore," I said. "I am inviting them to meet the management team." "That is you, isn't it?" I didn't wait for an answer. I turned and walked out of the house behind me. I heard my mother start to wail. I heard Aunt Linda asking, "Bob, did you really sign that paper?" I heard the house of cards beginning to collapse. I walked to my car. The evening air was cool and sweet. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. They were shaking from the adrenaline of finally dropping the weight I had carried for a lifetime. I sat in the driver's seat and looked back at the house. The lights were on in the living room. I could see the silhouettes of people arguing. They had spent 30 years training me to be the strong one, the one who fixed things, the one who cleaned up the mess. They had trained me too well. Tomorrow I was going to clean up the mess, and I was going to scrub it so hard that nothing of them would remain in my life. I started the engine and drove away. The conference room at Juniper Bridge Clinic was designed to be soothing. I had chosen the paint color myself, a soft, muted sage green, intended to calm anxious patients. But at 8:55 on Monday morning, the room felt less like a sanctuary and more like an execution chamber. I sat at the head of the oval table. To my right sat Alyssa Vane, my attorney, who had arranged her files in a perfect militaristic grid. To my left sat Nina Hart, my office manager, who was staring at the door with the intensity of a guard dog. And across from us sat Mr. Sterling. Mr. Sterling was not a family friend. He was a senior investigator from the State Insurance Commission. He wore a gray suit that looked like it was made of steel wool, and he had a face that suggested he had not smiled since the late '90s. He was here because I had formally invited him to audit the management team that had triggered the whistleblower complaint. The clock on the wall ticked at 9:00 exactly. The front door chimed. I watched through the glass wall as my family entered. My father walked in first, adjusting his tie, trying to project an air of authority that was visibly fraying around the edges. Derek followed, looking pale and sweaty, his eyes darting around the lobby as if looking for a trapdoor. My mother brought up the rear, clutching her handbag to her chest, her face a mask of tragic confusion. Nars stood up and opened the conference room door. "Right this way," she said. Her voice was not warm. They filed in. My father stopped when he saw Mr. Sterling. He hesitated, his hand resting on the back of a chair. "Who is this?" my father asked, his voice sharp. "I thought this was a private meeting to sign the partnership papers." "This is Mr. Sterling," I said, remaining seated. "From the State Insurance Commission. Since you filed a complaint alleging fraud, and since you claimed to be the management group behind the clinic, I thought it was only right that you answer his questions directly." My father's face went white. He looked at Derek. Derek looked like he was about to faint. "Sit down," Alyssa said. It wasn't a request. They sat. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. Let us begin, I said. Mr. Sterling is here to investigate the allegation that Juniper Bridge Clinic has been billing for services not rendered. He is also here to investigate the corporate structure of the entity that made the complaint. I slid a file folder across the table toward the investigator. This, I said, is the filing for Juniper Bridge Management Group, LLC. It lists Derek Caldwell as the registered agent and myself as a member. Mr. After Sterling opened the file, he adjusted his glasses. And this, I continued, sliding a second paper, is an affidavit of forgery notarized yesterday, stating that I never signed this document, along with a forensic analysis proving the signature was lifted from a student loan document dated 12 years ago. My father made a noise in his throat, a strangled sort of growl. Piper, you don't have to do this in front of a stranger. He is not a stranger. I said he is the law, and since you involved the law when you reported me, we are going to finish it with the law. I turned to Derek. Derek, I said, Mr. Sterling has a question about the access logs. Mr. Sterling looked up from the file. His eyes bored into my brother. Mr. Caldwell, the investigator said, his voice dry and devoid of emotion. We have digital records showing that a device registered to your name accessed the patient database of Juniper Bridge Clinic using an unauthorized administrative login. This occurred on 3 separate occasions. During these sessions, patient data was exported. Do you have a medical license? No, Derek whispered. Then you have committed a violation of the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, Mr. Sterling said, which carries a penalty of up to $50,000 per violation and up to 1 year in prison. I was just looking, Derek blurted out, turning to our father. Dad said, check the numbers. He said we needed to know how much she was making before we set the stipend. Shut up, Derek, my father hissed. No, I said. Keep talking, because here is the next exhibit. I placed the bank loan application on the table, the one for $50,000. The one with my father's signature as guarantor. This is bank fraud, Alyssa said, speaking for the first time. Her voice was cool, professional, and deadly. Applying for credit in the name of a business you do not own using a forged signature of the principal owner, Mr. Caldwell. Since you co-signed this instrument, you are equally liable. My mother let out a sob. Bob, you said it was just paperwork. You said we were helping her. We were, my father shouted, slamming his hand on the table. The veneer of control finally shattered. We were helping her. She is ungrateful. She has all this money, all this success, and she leaves us with nothing. I built this family. I have a right to a return on my investment. He pointed a shaking finger at me. You are destroying this family. He screamed. You are sending your own brother to jail over money. You are a monster. I looked at him. I saw the vein bulging in his neck. I saw the fear in his eyes masked by rage. No, I said, I am not destroying the family. I am preventing the family from destroying me. You owe us, he spat. I owe you nothing, I said. And here's the part you really need to hear. The part that makes all of this, the forgery, the fraud, the spying, completely pointless. I leaned forward. Even if I wanted to give you shares, I said, even if I was the weak, guilty daughter you think I am, I couldn't. I opened the final folder. I pulled out a single yellow document. It was the original Articles of Incorporation for Juniper Bridge Clinic. When I started this clinic, I said, I incorporated as a professional corporation in this state. There is a statute called the Corporate Practice of Medicine Doctrine. I looked at Alyssa. She nodded. The law states, Alyssa explained, that a medical practice can only be owned by licensed medical professionals. A doctor cannot legally split fees or give equity to a lay person. If Piper gave you 1% of this clinic, the state would revoke her medical license and shut the business down immediately. The family agreement you tried to force her to sign, it is illegal. It is void on its face. My father stared at me, his mouth open then closed. You mean, Derek stammered, we couldn't have owned it anyway. Never. I said, you were trying to steal something that the law says you cannot hold. You were trying to break into a vault that was designed to incinerate the money if you touched it. The silence that followed was absolute. My father slumped in his chair. The fight went out of him like air leaving a balloon. He wasn't just defeated. He was rendered irrelevant. All his scheming, all his pressure, all his lectures about business acumen, it was all based on a fundamental ignorance of the industry he was trying to exploit. Mr. Sterling closed his folder. The sound was loud in the quiet room. "Dr. Holmes," he said, "the Insurance Commission is satisfied that the whistleblower complaint was malicious and unfounded. We will be closing the audit against your license." He turned to my father and brother. "However," he continued, "I am required to refer the evidence of unauthorized data access and identity theft to the Attorney General's office, and I believe the bank has already flagged the loan application for federal review. You will be hearing from them." Mr. Sterling stood up. He nodded to me, then walked out of the room. My mother was weeping softly into her hands. "Piper, please. Can't you stop him? Can't you tell them it was a mistake?" "It wasn't a mistake," I said. "It was a choice. You chose to back them. You chose to let them use your address. You chose to keep the files they used to forge my name." "I am your mother," she whispered. "Then you should have protected me," I said. I stood up. "Alyssa has the restraining orders," I said. Alyssa slid 2 packets across the table. "These are temporary orders of protection," Alyssa said. "They ban you from coming within 500 ft of this clinic or Dr. Holmes's residence. They ban you from contacting her staff. They ban you from electronic communication. If you violate these terms, the police will be called immediately." "You're banning us," my father whispered. He looked old, suddenly incredibly old. "I am removing the tumor," I said. I looked at them one last time. "From this moment on," I said, "you do not have a daughter. You have a plaintiff. Do not call me. Do not text me. Do not come here. If you need to speak to me, you speak to Alyssa." "Piper," Derek pleaded, "I don't have money for a lawyer." "You have a truck," I said. "Sell it." I turned my back on them. "Neener," I said, "escort them out." I walked out of the conference room without looking back. I went straight to my office and closed the door. I sat down in my chair, the chair I had bought with my own money in the building I had leased with my own credit. I didn't watch them leave, but a few minutes later, Nenner knocked on my door. "They are gone," she said. "Did they say anything?" I asked. "Your father tried to say something to me at the door," Nar said. "He started to shout about how you would regret this." "What did you do?" I pointed to the security camera. Nar smiled. "He got in the car. He didn't say another word." I nodded. "Thank you, Neener." I said, "Go take a break. You earned it." She closed the door. I was alone. The silence in the office was different now. For 4 years, the silence had been filled with anxiety, with the pressure to prove myself, with the phantom voices of my family telling me I wasn't enough. Now the silence was empty, and it was beautiful. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the parking lot. The space where my father's car had been was empty. The asphalt was just asphalt. The world was just the world. I could hear the hum of the air conditioning. I could hear the faint ring of the phone at the front desk. I could hear the murmur of patients in the waiting room, people who came here because I helped them, not because they shared my DNA. The storm was over. The damage was done. Yes, I would have legal fees. I would have the emotional spar of knowing my father valued a paycheck more than my love. But the structural integrity of my life held. I walked out of my office and down the hallway. I passed the exam rooms, the lab, the nurse's station. Everything was working. The machine I built was humming along, efficient and strong. I stopped at the front entrance. I pushed open the glass door and stepped out onto the sidewalk. The morning sun was bright, cutting through the cool air. I looked up at the sign above the door, Juniper Bridge Clinic, Piper Holmes, M.D. It was just paint on wood, but it was the only name that mattered. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with air that finally felt like my own. "I am not getting revenge," I said to myself, the words disappearing into the wind. "I am just stopping them from eating off my plate." I turned around and walked back inside to see my next patient. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Are you listening while driving, cooking, or maybe winding down for the bed? Let me know in the comments below. I really want to connect with you guys. Please don't forget to subscribe to the Azad Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so this story can reach even more people. Thanks for watching.